The Pillars of Creation by Terry Goodkind. Continuing on page 228. Darkness surrounded her. She saw a whirl of bubbles as she went under. Surprised, she kicked frantically, trying to find bottom, something, anything to stop her descent. There was nothing. She was in deep water, weighted down by wet clothes. Rather than support her now, her heavy boots dragged her under. Jennsen flailed her arms, splashing at the surface just long enough to gasp a breath before she was under again. The shock of it was startling. With all her strength, she moved her arms, trying to swim to the surface, but her clothes were like a net around her, dampening and hampering any effective action. Eyes wide in fright, red hair floating, she could see shafts of the dim light wavering and glittering, piercing the murky depths around her. It was all happening so shockingly fast. In spite of how she was trying to seize life, it was slipping through her fingers. It didn't seem real. Jennsen. Shapes moved closer around her, her lungs aching for air. Althea said that no one could come through the swamp by the back way. There were beasts back here that would tear people apart. Jennsen had been lucky once. In the grip of terror, she saw a dark shape moving closer. She was not to be lucky twice. She didn't want to die. She knew she had thought that she did, but she knew now that she didn't. It was her only life, her precious life. She didn't want to lose it. She tried to swim toward the surface, toward the light, but everything seemed so slow, so thick, so heavy. Jennsen. The voice sounded urgent. Jennsen. Something bumped her. She saw flashes of iridescent green. It was the snake. Could she would have screamed. Struggling but unable to get away, she could only watch as the dark length of the thing underneath rolled up around her. Jennsen was too exhausted to fight. Her lungs burned for air as she saw herself sinking down through the shafts of light, getting farther and farther from the surface, from life. She tried to swim to that light and air, but her leaden arms merely waved, like weed drifting in the water. It was surprising to her, since she could swim. Jennsen. Now she was going to drown. Dark coils surrounded her. With all her clothes on, her heavy cloak, her knife, her boots, and as weary as she had been, not to mention her surprise and her half-breath before going under, her ability to swim had been overwhelmed. It hurt. She had thought drowning would be the sweet embrace of gentle waters. It was not. It hurt worse than anything had ever hurt. The feeling of helpless suffocation was horrifying. The pain crushing her chest was sharp and unbearable. She desperately wanted it to stop. She struggled in the water against the pain, the panic, consumed with the urgent need of air. Her throat was locked tight, terrified she might gasp in water. So badly did she need a breath. It hurt. Jennsen felt the coils of the snake under her, touching her, caressing her. She wondered if she should have tried to kill it when she'd had the chance. She supposed she could pull her knife now, but she was so weak. It hurt. The coils pushed against her. In the silent darkness, she had stopped struggling. There was no reason. Jennsen. She wondered why the voice didn't ask her to surrender, the way it always did. She thought it ironic, since she was at last resigned, that the voice didn't ask, but only called her name. Jennsen felt something bump her shoulder, something hard. Another bumped her head, then her thigh. She was being pushed against the bank, where the roots went down into the water. Almost without realizing what she was doing, she seized the roots and pulled with sudden desperation. The thing under her continued its gentle push up. Jennsen broke the surface. Water sluiced off her head in a sudden rush of sound. Mouth open wide, she gasped wildly at the air. She pulled herself up enough to throw her shoulders up onto the knotted roots. She couldn't drag herself the rest of the way out of the water, but at least her head was up, and she could breathe. Her legs dangled, drifting, floating in the water. Panting with her eyes closed, Jennsen clung to the roots with trembling fingers to keep herself from slipping back into the water. The desperate pulls of air felt wonderful as they filled her lungs. With each breath, she could feel her strength returning. Finally, inch by inch, hand over hand, pulling against the roots, she managed to drag herself up onto the bank. She flopped on her side, panting, coughing, shivering, watching the water lapping only inches away. She felt giddy with the simple joy of breathing air. She saw then the snake's head break the surface easily, gracefully, silently. Yellow eyes in the black band watched her. They stared at each other for a time. "Thank you," Jennsen whispered. The snake, having seen her there on the bank, seen her breathing, seen her living, slipped back into the water. Jennsen had no idea what it had thought, or why it hadn't tried to kill her again when it had an easy chance at it. Maybe after the first time, it thought she might be too big to eat, or might suddenly fight back. But why help her? Could it be a sign of respect? Maybe it simply viewed her as competition for food and wanted her out of its territory, but didn't want to fight her again. Jennsen had no idea why it had pushed her to the surface. But the snake had saved her life. She hated snakes, and this one had saved her from drowning. One of the things that she had feared most had been her salvation. Still trying to catch her breath, to say nothing of recovering her wits after coming so close to passing through the veil into death, she began moving again on her hands and knees, crawling up higher. Water ran from her clothes and hair. She couldn't get to her feet yet, didn't trust her legs yet, so she crawled. It felt good just to be able to move. Before long, she had recovered enough to stagger her feet. She had to keep going. Her time was running out. Walking revived her further. She had always liked to walk. It made her feel alive again, like her old self. She knew she wanted to live. She wanted Sebastian to live too. Hurrying through the tangle of vines and thorny shrubs, over the twisted roots and among the trees, her worry eased when she came at last to the place where the rock began to rise up from the mossy ground. She started up the spine of rock, relieved to have found the landmark among the trackless swamp, and to be climbing out of the wet, boggy bottom. It was getting darker by the moment, and she remembered that it was a long way up. Jennsen desperately didn't want to spend the night in the swamp, but she didn't want to be scaling the spine of rock in the dark either. Those fears spurred her on. While there was still light enough, she had to keep moving. When she stumbled, she recalled how in places the ground dropped off precipitously to the sides. She admonished herself to be more careful. No helpful snake would catch her if she plummeted off a cliff in the dark. While she made her way up, she kept going over in her mind everything that Althea had told her, hoping that something in it might be helpful. Jennsen didn't know how she could get Sebastian out, but she knew she had to try. She was his only hope. He had saved her life before. She had to help save his now. She wanted desperately to see his smile, his blue eyes, his spikes of white hair. She couldn't bear the thought of them torturing him. She had to get him out of their clutches. But how was she to accomplish such an impossible task? First, she had to get back there, she decided. Hopefully by then she would think of a way. Tom would get her back to the palace. Tom would be waiting, worrying. Tom. Why had Tom helped her? The nugget of that question stuck out in her mind like a landmark to an answer, like the spine of rock led up and out of the swamp. She just didn't know where it led. Tom had helped her. Why? She focused her mind on that question as she trudged up the steep rise. He said he couldn't live with himself if he watched her go out onto the Azrith plains alone with no supplies. He said she would die, and he couldn't let that happen. That seemed a decent enough sentiment. She knew there was more, though. He seemed determined to help her, almost as if he was duty-bound. He never really questioned what it was she had to do, only her method of going about it, then did what he could to assist her. Tom said that she should tell Lord Rahl about his help, that he was a good man. That memory kept nagging at her. Even though it had been an offhand comment, he'd been serious. But what had he meant? She kept turning it over in her mind as she ascended the rise of rock up among the trees, among the limbs and leaves. Animals, distant, strange creatures, called out through the humid air. Others, more distant, answered with the same echoing whoops and whistles. The smell of the swamp rose to her on hot waves of air. Jennsen recalled that Tom had seen her knife when she'd been looking for her purse that had been stolen. She had pulled back her cloak only to find that the leather thong from her purse of coins had been cut. He had seen the knife then. Jennsen paused in her climb and straightened. Could it be that Tom thought she was some kind of representative or agent of the Lord Rahl? Could it be that Tom thought she was on an important mission on behalf of Lord Rahl? Could it be that Tom thought she knew Lord Rahl? Was it the knife that made him think she was someone special? Perhaps it had been her pressing determination to go on a seemingly impossible journey. He certainly knew how important she thought it was. Perhaps it was that she had told him it was a matter of life and death. Jennsen moved on, ducking under heavy limbs, drooping down close over the rock. On the other side, she stood and looked around, realizing that darkness was quickly descending. With a renewed sense of urgency, she scrambled up the steep slope. She recalled how Tom had looked at her red hair. People were often worried about her because of her red hair. Many thought she had the gift because of it. She had often encountered people who feared her because of her red hair. She had used that fear deliberately to help herself stay safe. That first night with Sebastian, she had made him think she had some kind of magical ability to protect her if he harbored hostile intent. She had used people's fear to ward the men at the inn. All of those things churned together in Jennsen's mind as she climbed ever upward, gasping for breath at the strenuous effort. Darkness was enveloping her. She didn't know if she could still make it through in such conditions, but she knew she had to try. For Sebastian, she had to keep going. Just then, something dark swept up right at her face. Jennsen let out a clipped cry and nearly fell as the dark thing fluttered away. Bats. She put a hand over her racing heart. It was beating as fast as their wings. The little creatures had come out to snatch the bugs that were so thick in the air. She realized then that in her surprise, she might easily have stepped back and fallen. It was frightening to think how a lapse of attention in the dark, a fright, a loose rock, or a slip, could put her over an edge from which there could be no return. She knew, though, that remaining in the swamp at night might be just as fatal. Weary from the day's struggles, the sudden scares, she climbed, stumbling in the dark, feeling the rock, groping her way, trying to stay on the ridge and not wander off what she knew to be steep drops to either side. She worried, too, what creatures might still come out in the darkness to seize her, just as she thought she was nearly free of the swamp. Althea had said that no one could come into the swamp by the back way. A new worry gripped her. Maybe after dark, Tom would be in danger. Under cover of night, one of the creatures might venture out of the swamp to snatch him. What if she reached the meadow only to discover Tom and his horses mauled by the monsters created out of Althea's magic? What would she do then? She had worries enough. She told herself not to come up with new ones. Jennsen stumbled suddenly out into the open. There was a fire burning. She stared, trying to reconcile it. "Jennsen!" Tom jumped up and rushed over. He put his big arm around her shoulders to steady her. "Dear spirits, are you all right?" She nodded, too exhausted to speak. He didn't see the nod. He was already running for the wagon. Jennsen sank down to sit heavily on the grassy ground, catching her breath, surprised to be there at last, and relieved beyond words to be free of the swamp. Tom ran back with a blanket. "You're soaking wet," he said as he threw the blanket around her. "What happened?" "I went for a swim." He paused at mopping her face with the corner of the blanket to frown at her. "I don't want to tell you your business, but I don't think that was a good idea." "The snake would agree with you." His frown tightened as his face drew closer to hers. "Snake? What happened in there? What do you mean the snake would agree with me?" Still struggling to get her breath, Jennsen waved a hand, dismissing it. She had been so afraid of being caught down there in the dark that she had virtually been running up the steep hillside for the last hour on top of the exertion of the rest of it. She was spent. The fear of it all was catching up with her. Her shoulders began to tremble. She realized then that she was clutching Tom's muscular arm for dear life. He seemed not to notice, or if he did, he didn't comment on it. She drew back, despite how good it felt to feel his strength, his solid, reliable form, his sincere concern. Tom protectively bunched more of the blanket around her. "Did you make it through to Althea's?" She nodded, and when he handed her a waterskin, drank greedily. "I swear I've never heard of anyone ever making it back out of that swamp, except going in the other side when they were invited. Did you see any of the beasts?" "I had a snake, bigger round than your leg, wrapped around me. I got a pretty good look at it. More of a look than I wanted, actually." He let out a low whistle. "Did the sorceress help you then? Did you get what you needed from her? Is everything all right then?" He halted abruptly and seemed to rein in his curiosity. "Sorry, you're all cold and wet. I shouldn't be asking you so many questions." "Althea and I had a long talk. I can't say that I got what I needed, but just knowing the truth is better than chasing illusions." Concern showed in his eyes and the way he made sure the warm blanket was covering her. "If you didn't get the help you needed, then what will you do now?" Jennsen drew her knife along with a breath to steel herself. Holding the knife by the blade, she held it up before Tom's face so that the handle was lit by the firelight. The worked metal that made up the ornate letter R glimmered as if it were covered in jewels. She held it out before her like a talisman, like an official proclamation cast in silver, like a demand from on high that could not be denied. "I need to get back to the palace." Without pause, Tom scooped her up in his massive arms as if she were no more weight than a lamb and carried her to the wagon. He lifted her over the side and gently set her in the back among the nest of blankets. "Don't worry, I'll get you back there. You did the hard part. Now you just rest in those warm blankets and let me get you back there." Jennsen was relieved to have her suspicions confirmed. In a way, though, it made her feel slimy, like falling into the swamp again. She was lying to him, using him. That wasn't right. But she didn't know what else to do. Before he turned away, she seized his arm. "Tom, aren't you afraid to be helping me when I'm involved in something so—" "Dangerous," he finished for her. "What I'm doing is nothing much compared to the risk you took in there." He gestured to her matted red hair. "I'm nothing special like you, but I'm glad you allowed me to do the small part I could do." "I'm not nearly as special as you think I am." She suddenly felt very small. "I'm just doing as I must." Tom pulled blankets from the back up toward her. "I see a lot of people. I don't need the gift to tell you're special." "You know that this is secret business, and I can't tell you what it is I'm doing. I'm sorry, but I can't." "Of course you can't. Only special people carry such a special weapon. I'd not expect you to say a word, and I'd not ask." "Thank you, Tom." Feeling even more detestable to be using him as she was, and when he was such a sincere man, Jennsen squeezed his arm in gratitude. "I can tell you it's important, and you're a huge help in it all." He smiled. "You wrap yourself in those blankets and get yourself dry. We'll soon be back out on the Azrith Plains. In case you forgot, it's winter out there. Wet as you are, you'll freeze." "Thank you, Tom. You're a good man." Jennsen slumped back into the blankets, too exhausted from the ordeal to sit up any longer. "I'm counting on you to tell Lord Rahl," he said with his easy laugh. Tom quickly doused the fire and then climbed up into the wagon seat. Without guile, he was helping her, at what he had to believe was at least some risk. She feared to think what they might do to him were he to be caught helping darken Rahl's daughter. Here he thought he was helping the Lord Rahl, and he was doing the opposite without even knowing the chance he was taking. Before it was over, she would put him at greater risk yet. Despite her fear that they were racing back to the palace of the man who wanted to kill her, the stomach-churning anxiety of what lay ahead, the disappointment of failing to get the help she had hoped for, the heartbreak of learning all she had from Althea, the cold that was making her wet clothes feel like ice, and the bouncing wagon, Jennsen was soon fast asleep. Chapter 25. Swaying atop the seat of the wagon, Jennsen watched the immense plateau gradually drawing closer. The morning sun lit the soaring stone walls of the People's Palace, warming them in a pastel glow. Although the wind had died down, the morning air remained bone-chilling cold. After the reeking rot of the swamp, she welcomed the flat, dry, stony scent of the open plain. With her fingertips, Jennsen rubbed her forehead, trying to soothe her dull, throbbing headache. Tom had driven all night, and she had slept in the back of the bouncing wagon, but not well, nor nearly long enough. At least she had slept some, and they had made it back. "Too bad Lord Rahl isn't there." Shocked out of her private thoughts, Jennsen opened her eyes. "What?" "Lord Rahl." Tom gestured off to the right, to the south. "It's too bad he isn't here to help you." He had pointed south, the direction of the old world. On occasion, Jennsen's mother had spoken of the bond connecting the Daharan people with the Lord Rahl. Through its ancient and arcane magic, Daharans were somehow able to sense where the Lord Rahl was. While the strength of the bond varied among Daharan people, they all shared it to some degree. What the Lord Rahl accrued from the bond, Jennsen didn't know. She thought of it as yet more chains of domination around his people. In her mother's case, though, it helped them avoid Darken Rahl's clutches. From her mother's descriptions, Jennsen was aware of the bond, but for some reason never felt anything of it. Perhaps it was so weak in her, as it was with some Daharan people, that she simply couldn't feel it. Her mother said it had nothing to do with one's level of devotion to the Lord Rahl, that it was purely a link of magic, and as such, it would be governed by criteria other than her feelings about the man. Jennsen remembered times when her mother would stand in the doorway of their home, or at a window, or pause out in the forest and stare off toward the horizon. Jennsen knew at those times that her mother was sensing Darken Rahl through the bond, where he was, and how close. It was a shame that it told her only where the Lord Rahl himself was, and not the brutes he sent after them. Tom, being Daharan, took that bond to the Lord Rahl for granted, and had just given Jennsen a valuable bit of information. Lord Rahl was not at his palace. That news buoyed her hopes. It was one less obstacle, one less thing to worry about. Lord Rahl was off to the south, probably in the old world, making war on the people there, as Sebastian had told her. Yes, she finally said. Too bad. The marketplace below the plateau was already busy. Wisps of dust drifted above the crowds gathered there and over the road south. She wondered if Irma the sausage lady was there. Jennsen missed Betty. She wanted so much to see the goat's little tail wagging furiously, to hear her bleating with elation at being reunited with her lifelong friend. Tom pointed his team toward the market, to where he had been set up selling his load of wine. Maybe Irma would go to the same place. Jennsen would have to leave Betty again in order to go up through the entrance and into the plateau. It would be a long climb up all those stairs, and then she had to find where Sebastian was being held. As the wagon rumbled across the hardpan of the Azrith Plains, Jennsen stared at the empty road that wound its way up the side of the plateau. "Take the road," she said. "What?" "Take the road up to the palace." "Are you sure, Jennsen?" "I don't think that's wise. It's only for official business." "Take the road." In answer, he urged the horses to the left, away from their course toward the market and toward the base of the road instead. From the corner of her eye, she saw him snatch glances at his inscrutable passenger. Soldiers stationed at the base of the plateau where the road began its ascent watched them approach. As the wagon rolled closer, Jennsen drew out her knife. "Don't stop," she said to Tom. He stared over at her. "What? I have to. They have bows, you know." Jennsen continued to stare ahead. "Just keep going." When they reached the soldiers, Jennsen held the knife out, holding it by the blade so that the handle stuck up above her fist. She kept her arm out straight and stiff, pointed down at the cluster of men so that they might see what she was announcing. She didn't look at them, but watched the road ahead, showing them the knife as if she couldn't be bothered to talk to them. Every pair of eyes watched that knife handle with the ornate letter R upon it as it flashed past their eyes. None moved to stop the wagon or to knock an arrow. Tom let out a low whistle. The wagon shook and rattled as it rolled onward. The road switched back and forth as it made its way steadily up the plateau. In some places there was ample room, but occasionally the road narrowed, forcing the wagon to ride close to the dizzying drop. Each tight bend offered them a new vista, a new view of the expanse of the Azrith Plains spread out far below. Off in the distance, the plains were rimmed by dusky blue mountains. When they arrived at the bridge, they finally did have to stop. The bridge was pulled up. Her faith in herself and her plan faltered as she realized that this, and not her bold bluff, was probably the reason the soldiers below had let her pass so easily. They knew she couldn't get over the chasm unless the guards lowered the bridge. They knew she couldn't simply barge into the palace, and at the same time, they didn't have to challenge a woman who had what very well might be an official pass of sorts from the Lord Rahl himself. Worse yet, she now saw how the soldiers had also isolated, in a place without escape or hope of rescue by reinforcements, people they deemed potential intruders. Any hostile foray could be stopped cold here, and in all likelihood, captured or killed on the spot. It was no wonder Tom had advised against using the road up. Stimulated by the effort of the climb, the big horses tossed their heads at the interruption. One man stepped in front and took control of the horses' bits to keep them still. Soldiers approached the side of the wagon. Jennsen sat on the cliffside, and although she saw men guarding the rear quarter on her side, most of the men approached on Tom's side. "Good day, Sergeant," Tom called out. The man scrutinized the inside of the wagon, and after finding it empty, looked up at the two in the seat. "Good day." Jennsen knew that this was no time for her to become timid. If she failed here, everything would be lost. Not only would Sebastian have no hope, but she would likely join him in a dungeon. She could not afford to lose her nerve. When the soldiers were close enough, She reached past Tom to hold the knife down toward the sergeant of the guards, showing him the handle as if she were flashing a royal pass. "Drop the bridge," she said, before he had a chance to ask them anything. The sergeant took in the knife handle before meeting her glare. "What's your business?" Sebastian had told her how to bluff. He had explained how she had done it her whole life, that she was a natural at it. Now she had to do it with deliberate intent if she was to save him and get out alive herself. Despite how fast her heart pounded, she showed the man a stern but empty expression. "Lord Rahl's business. Lower the bridge." She thought that he was taken back a bit by her tone, or possibly he was worried by her unexpected words. She could see his level of caution rise, tensing his features. Nevertheless, he stood his ground. "I need a little more than that, ma'am." Jennsen twirled the knife, weaving it over and under and between her fingers, the polished metal flashing in the sunlight as it spun, until it came to an abrupt halt with the handle upright in her fist once more, the ornate letter R showing to the soldier. In a deliberate manner, she pushed the hood of her cloak back, exposing her fall of red hair to the morning sunlight and the men's stares. She could see in their eyes that her implication had been clearly understood. "I know you have a job to do," Jennsen said with terrible calm, "but so do I. I'm on official business for Lord Rahl. I'm sure you can appreciate how displeased Lord Rahl would be with me were I to discuss his business with everyone who asked about it. Therefore, I have no intention of doing so. But I can tell you that I wouldn't be here were it not a matter of life or death. You are wasting my precious time, Sergeant. Now lower the bridge." "And what might be your name, ma'am?" Jennsen leaned farther past Tom in order to more directly scowl at the sergeant. "Unless you lower that bridge, Sergeant, and right now, you will forever after remember me as Trouble, sent by Lord Rahl himself." The sergeant, backed by a few dozen men with pikes along with crossbows, swords, and axes, didn't flinch. He looked at Tom. "What's your part in this?" Tom shrugged. "Just driving the wagon. Were I you, Sergeant, this is one lady I'd not want to be delaying." "Is that so?" "It is," Tom said with conviction. The sergeant gazed long and hard into Tom's eyes. Finally, he considered Jennsen again, then turned and rolled his hand, motioning a man to lower the bridge. Jennsen gestured with her knife toward the palace up the road. "How may I find the place where we hold prisoners?" As the gears started clattering and the bridge began to descend, he turned back to Jennsen. "Inquire with the guards at the top. They can direct you, ma'am." "Thank you," Jennsen said with finality, sitting back up straight and putting her eyes ahead, waiting for the bridge to lower. Once it had thudded into place, the sergeant signaled them ahead. Tom nodded his thanks and flicked the reins. Jennsen had to play the part through the whole way if this were to have a chance of working. She found that her performance was aided by her very real anger. She was disturbed, though, that Tom had played some part in the success of the bluff. She wouldn't have his help for all of it. She decided that it would be wise to keep her anger out and in plain view of the other guards. "You want to see the prisoners?" Tom asked. She realized that she never had said why she had to return to the palace. "Yes, they've taken a man prisoner by mistake. I've come to see that he's released." Tom checked the horses with the reins, keeping them wide to negotiate the wagon around a switchback. "Ask for Captain Lerner," he said at last. Jennsen glanced over at him, surprised that he had offered a name rather than an objection. "A friend of yours?" The reins moved ever so slightly with practiced precision, guiding the horses around the bend. "I don't know if I'd call him a friend. I've dealt with him a time or two." "Wine?" Tom smiled. "No, other things." He apparently didn't intend to say what other things. Jennsen watched the sweep of the Azrith plains and distant mountains as they rode up the side of the plateau. Somewhere beyond those plains, those mountains, lay freedom. At the top, the road leveled out before a great gate through the massive outer wall of the palace. The guards stationed before the gate there waved them through, then blew whistles in a short series of notes to others unseen beyond the walls. Jennsen realized that they had not arrived unannounced. She nearly gasped as they cleared the short tunnel through the massive outer wall. Inside, expansive grounds spread out before them. Lawns and hedges bordered the road that curved toward a hill of steps well over a half-mile away. The grounds inside the walls were teeming with soldiers in smart uniforms of leather and chainmail covered with wool tunics. Many, with pikes held upright at precisely the same angle, lined the route. These men were not loafing about. They weren't the kind to be surprised by what came up the road. Tom took it all in casually. Jennsen tried to keep her eyes pointed ahead. She tried to look indifferent amid such splendor. Before the hill of steps awaited a reception party of guards over 100 strong. Tom pulled the wagon into the pocket they'd formed, blocking the road. Jennsen saw, standing on the steps overlooking the soldiers, 3 men in robes. 2 wore silver-colored robes. Between them, 1 step higher, stood an older man wearing white, both hands held in the opposite sleeves trimmed in golden-colored braiding that shimmered in the sunlight. Tom set the brake on the wagon as the soldier took control of the horses to keep them from moving. Before Tom could begin climbing down, Jennsen put a hand on his arm to stop him. "This is as far as you go." "But you..." "You've done enough. You helped with the part I needed. I can handle it from here on out on my own." His measured, blue-eyed gaze swept over the guards standing around the wagon. He seemed reluctant to accede. "I don't think it could hurt if I went along." "I'd rather you go back to your brothers." He glanced to her hand on his arm before looking up into her eyes. "If that's your wish." His voice lowered to little more than a whisper. "Will I see you again?" It sounded more like a request than a question. Jennsen could not bring herself to deny such a simple thing, not after all he had done for her. "We'll need to go down to the market to buy some horses. I'll stop by your place first, right after I'm done inside with getting my friend released." "Promise?" Under her breath, she said, "I have to pay you for your services, remember?" His lopsided grin reappeared. "I've never met anyone like you, Jennsen." He noticed the soldiers, remembering then where he was, and cleared his throat. "I'm thankful you let me do my small part, ma'am. I will hold you to your word on the rest of it." He had risked enough by bringing her this far, a risk he hadn't known he was taking. Jennsen fervently hoped that in her brief smile he would see how genuinely grateful she was for his help, since she didn't think she could afford to keep her promise to see him before they left. With his powerful hand gripping her arm to halt her for a final word, he spoke in a low but solemn voice, "Steel against steel, that he may be the magic against magic." Jennsen had absolutely no idea what he meant. Staring into his intense gaze, she answered with a single firm nod. Not wanting to let the soldiers suspect that she might really be mild-mannered, Jennsen turned away and climbed down from the wagon to stand before the man who looked to be in charge. She allowed him only a perfunctory look at the knife before replacing it in the sheath at her belt. "I need to see the man in charge of any prisoners you're holding. Captain Lerner, if memory serves me." His brow drew together. "You want to see the captain of the prison guards?" Jennsen didn't know his rank. She didn't know much of anything about military matters, except that for most of her life soldiers like these had been trying to kill her. He could be a general, or for all she knew, a corporal. As she considered the man, his dress, his age, his bearing, she reasoned that he definitely looked more than a corporal. She feared to make a mistake with his rank, though, and decided it would be healthier to ignore it. Jennsen dismissed his question with a curt flick of her hand. "I haven't got all day. I'll need an escort, of course. You and some of your men will do, I suppose." As she started up the steps, she glanced over her shoulder and saw Tom wink at her. It lifted her heart. The soldiers had parted to let his wagon leave, so he flicked the reins and urged his big horses away. Jennsen hated to see his comforting presence go. She turned her mind from her fears. "You," she said, gesturing to the man in the white robes, "take me to where you hold prisoners." The man, the top of his head showing through his thinning gray hair, lifted a finger, sending most of the milling guards back to their posts. The officer of mysterious rank and a dozen of his soldiers remained behind her. "May I see the knife?" the man in the white robes asked in a gentle voice. Jennsen suspected that this man, able to dismiss guards of rank, must be someone important. Important people in Lord Rahl's palace might have the gift. It occurred to her that if he did have the gift, he would see her as a whole in the world. It also occurred to her that this was a very poor time to blurt out a confession, and an even worse time to try to bolt for the gate. She had to hope that he was a palace official and that he wasn't gifted. Many of the soldiers were still watching. Jennsen casually pulled her knife from the sheath at her belt. Without a word, but showing a face that clearly said she was running out of patience, she held the knife up before the man's eyes so he could see the ornate R on the handle. He looked down his nose at the weapon before returning his attention to her. "And this is real?" "No," Jennsen snapped. "I smelted it while sitting around the campfire last night. Are you going to take me to where you hold prisoners or not?" Showing no reaction, the man graciously held out a hand. "If you would follow me this way, madam."
Chapter 26. The palace official's white robes flowed out behind him as he ascended the hill of steps, flanked by the two men in silver robes. Jennsen remained what she judged to be an imperious distance behind the men. When the man in white noticed how she had lagged behind, he slowed to allow her to catch up. She slowed her pace accordingly, maintaining the distance. He nervously checked behind, then slowed more. She slowed yet more, until the three robed men, Jennsen and the soldiers behind her, were all pausing ponderously on each step. When they reached the next landing on the broad, sunlit marble steps, the man glanced over his shoulder again. Jennsen gestured impatiently. He finally understood that she had no intention of walking with him, but expected him to lead the procession. The man acceded, quickening his steps, allowing her to have the distance she demanded, resigned to being what amounted to her lowly crier. The officer of unknown rank and his dozen soldiers climbed the stairs with mincing steps, trying to duplicate the distance she maintained in front of her. It was unanticipated and awkward for her escorts. She wanted it to be. Like her red hair, the distraction gave them something to think about, something to worry about. At intervals, the smooth ascent of marble stairs was broken by broad landings that gave the legs a rest before continuing up. At the top of the stairs, tall, embossed brass doors were set back beyond colossal columns. The entire front of the palace, looming over them, was one of the grandest sights Jennsen had ever seen. But her mind was not on the intricate architecture of the entrance. She was thinking about what lay inside. They passed the shadows of the towering columns and swept on through the doorway. The dozen soldiers still trailed in her wake, their weapons, belts, and mail jangling. The sound of their boots on the polished marble floor echoed off the walls of a grand entry lined with fluted pillars. Deeper into the palace, people going about their business or standing in twos and threes, talking or strolling the balconies, paused to watch the unusual procession, paused to see the officials in their white and silver robes and a dozen guards at a respectful distance escorting a woman with red hair. By her outfit, especially in comparison to the neat, clean dress of the others, it was obvious that she had just traveled in. Rather than being embarrassed by her clothes, Jennsen was pleased that they added to the sense of urgent mystery. The reaction of the people, too, was bound to infect her escort. After the man in white whispered to the two in silver robes, they nodded and ran on ahead, vanishing around a corner. The guards followed at her measured distance. The procession wound through a maze of small passageways and funneled down narrow service stairs. Jennsen and her escorts made a number of turns through intersecting halls, along dim corridors to doors opening onto wide halls, and intermittently descended a variety of stairs, until she could no longer keep track of their route. By the dusty condition of some of the dingy stairs and musty-smelling, apparently little-used halls, she realized that the man in white robes was taking her on a shortcut through the palace in order to get her to where she wanted to go as swiftly as possible. This, too, was reassuring, because it meant they took her seriously. That helped her confidence in playing the part. She told herself that she was important. She was a personal representative of Lord Rahl himself, and she was not going to be deterred by anyone. They were here for no other purpose but to assist her. It was their job, their duty. Since it was hopeless trying to keep track of all the turns and twists they took, she put her mind instead to the matter at hand, to what she would do and say, going over it all in her head. Jennsen reminded herself that no matter what condition Sebastian was in, she had to keep to her plan. Acting surprised, bursting into tears, falling on him, wailing, would do neither of them any good. She hoped that when she saw him, she could remember all that. The man in white checked his charge before turning down a stone stairwell. Dull red dust showed through chipped paint on the iron railing. The uncomfortably steep flight of stairs twisted downward, finally ending in a lower passageway lit by the eerie, wavering light from torches in short floor stands, rather than by lamps and reflectors that were used to light the way above. The two men in silver robes who had gone on ahead were waiting for them at the bottom. Hazy smoke hung near the low beams of the ceiling, leaving the place reeking of burning pitch. She could see her breath in the cold air. Jennsen felt viscerally how deep they were in the people's palace. She had a brief, unpleasant memory of what it felt like sinking down beneath the dark, bottomless water of the swamp. She felt a similar pressure on her chest in the depths of the palace as she imagined the inconceivable weight overhead. Down the murky stone corridor to the right, she thought she could see evenly spaced doors. In some of the doors, it looked like there might be fingers gripping the edge of small openings. From down that hall in the darkness came a dry, echoing cough. As she looked off toward the unseen source of the sound, she had the feeling that this was a place where men were sent not for punishment, but to die. Before an iron-bound door sealing off the corridor to the left stood a powerfully built man, feet spread, hands clasped behind his back, chin held high. His bearing, his size, the way his cut-stone gaze locked on her, made Jennsen's breath falter. She wanted to run. Why did she think she could do this? After all, who was she? Just a nobody. Althea said that wasn't true unless she made it so herself. Jennsen wished she had as much faith in her own abilities as Althea seemed to have in her. Looking Jennsen in the eye, the man in white robes held a hand out in introduction. "Captain Lerner, as you requested." He turned to the captain and held his other hand out toward Jennsen. "A personal envoy of Lord Rahl, so she says." The captain gave the man in white a grim smile. "Thank you," she said to the men who had escorted her. "That will be all." The man in white opened his mouth to speak, then, as he met the look in her eyes, thought better of it and bowed. With his arms held out like a hen herding chicks, he ushered the other two in silver and then the soldiers away with him. "I'm looking for a man I heard was taken prisoner," she told the big man standing before the door. "For what reason?" "Someone messed up. He was taken prisoner by mistake." "Who says it was a mistake?" Jennsen lifted the knife from its sheath at her belt and held it by the blade, nonchalantly showing the man the handle. "I do." His iron eyes briefly took in the design on the handle. Still, he stood in the same relaxed stance, barring the iron door to the passageway beyond. Jennsen twirled the knife through her fingers, caught it by the handle, and returned it smoothly to its sheath at her belt. "I used to carry one too," he said, with a nod toward the knife she had returned to its sheath. "Few years back." "But not any longer?" She applied gentle pressure to the crossguard until she felt the knife click home. The soft sound echoed back from the darkness behind her. He shrugged. "It gets wearing, having your life at risk for Lord Rahl all the time." Jennsen feared he might ask her something about the Lord Rahl, something she couldn't answer, but should be able to. She sought to block that possibility. "You served under Darken Rahl, then. That was before my time. It must have been a great honor to have known him." "Obviously, you didn't know the man." She feared she had just failed her first test. She had thought that everyone who served would be a loyal follower. She thought it would be safe to go with that assumption. It wasn't. Captain Lerner turned his head and spat. He looked back at her with challenge. "Darken Rahl was a twisted bastard. I'd have liked to put his knife between his ribs and twisted it good." Despite her anxiety, she showed him no more than a cool expression. "Then why didn't you?" "When the whole world is crazy, it doesn't pay to be sane. I finally told them I was getting too old and took a job down here. Someone far better than I ever was finally sent Darken Rahl to the Keeper." Jennsen was thrown off by such an unexpected sentiment. She didn't know if the man had really hated Darken Rahl, or if he was only saying he did in front of her so as to show loyalty to the new Lord Rahl, Richard, who had killed his father and assumed power. She tried to gather her wits without being obvious. "Well, Tom said you weren't stupid. I guess he knew what he was talking about." The captain laughed, a spontaneous, deep rolling sound that unexpectedly made Jennsen smile at the incongruity of it coming from a man who otherwise looked like death's darling. "Tom would know." He clapped a fist to his heart in salute. His face softened to an easy smile. Tom had helped her again. Jennsen clapped a fist to her heart, returning the salute. It seemed the right thing to do. "I'm Jennsen." "Pleased, Jennsen." He let out a sigh. "Maybe if I'd have known the new Lord Rahl like you do, I might still be serving with you. But I'd already given it up by then and come down here. The new Lord Rahl has changed everything, all the rules. He's turned the whole world upside down, I guess." Jennsen feared she was treading on dangerous ground. She didn't know what the man meant and feared to say anything in response. She simply nodded and forged ahead with her reason for being there. "I can see why Tom said that you'd be the one to see." "What's this about, Jennsen?" She took a deep, casual breath, preparing herself. She had thought it out 100 different ways, forward and backward. She was ready to come at it from any angle. You know that those of us who serve Lord Rahl in this capacity can't always allow everyone to know what we're doing, or who we are. Captain Lerner was nodding. Of course. Jennsen folded her arms, trying to look relaxed, despite how her heart pounded. She had made it past the riskiest assumption. She had guessed correctly. Well, I had a man working with me, Jennsen went on. I heard he was taken prisoner. It wouldn't surprise me. The fellow sticks out in a crowd. But for what we were doing, that was what we needed. Unfortunately, the guards must have noticed him, too. Because of the mission and the people we were dealing with, he was well armed. So that would have put the men who stopped him on edge. He hasn't been here before, so he wouldn't know who to trust, and besides, it's traitors we're hunting. The captain was frowning in thought as he rubbed his jaw. Traitors? In the palace? We don't know for certain. We suspect infiltrators are about. That's who we're hunting. So he wouldn't dare to trust anyone here. If the wrong ears heard who he really was, it would imperil the rest of us. I doubt he would even give you his real name, though he might have. Sebastian. With the danger we're in, he would know that the less he says, then the less risk there is to the others on our team. He stared off, seeming to be caught up in her story. No prisoner has admitted to that name. His brow bunched in earnest reflection. What's he look like? A few years older than me, blue eyes, short white hair. The captain instantly recognized the description. That one. My information was correct then? You have him. She wanted to grab the man by his leather and shake him. She wanted to ask if they'd hurt Sebastian. She wanted to scream at him to let Sebastian out. Yes, we have him, if it's the same man you're talking about, that is. Matches your description anyway. Good. I need him back. I have urgent business for him. I can't afford to delay. We need to leave at once before the trail gets any colder. It would be best if we not make a big show of him being released. We need to slip out with as little notice as possible, as little contact with soldiers as possible. The ring of infiltrators might have managed to place themselves in the army. Captain Lerner folded his arms and sighed as he leaned down toward her a little, looking at her as a big brother might look at a little sister. Jennsen, are you sure he's one of your men? Jennsen feared to overplay the bluff. He was chosen for this assignment specifically because soldiers would not suspect he was one of us. Looking at him, you'd never guess. Sebastian has a proven knack for being able to get close to the infiltrators without them getting wind that he's one of our men. But are you sure of this man's heart? Are you really sure he'd not bring Lord Rahl into harm's view? Sebastian is one of mine. That much I know. But I'm not sure the man you have is my Sebastian. I guess I'd have to see him to be sure. Why? The captain stared off as he shook his head. I don't know. I spent a lot of years carrying the knife, like you're starting out doing, and going places where you can't carry the knife, so you won't be known for who you really are. I don't have to tell you how being in such danger all the time sometimes gives you a sense about people. Something about that fellow with the white hair makes mine stand on end. Jennsen didn't know what to say. The captain was twice the size of Sebastian, so it wasn't Sebastian's physical presence that would worry the man. Of course, size was no valid indicator of potential threat. Jennsen very well might be able to beat the captain in a knife fight. Maybe Captain Lerner sensed how deadly Sebastian was with weapons. The captain's eyes had been heedful of the way her fingers handled the knife. Perhaps the captain was able to tell by various small things that Sebastian was not Daharan. That could be troublesome, but Jennsen had thought out a plan to explain that, too, just in case. Tom still up to his trouble? The man asked. Oh, you know Tom. He's selling wine, along with the help of Joe and Clayton. The captain stared incredulously. Tom and his brothers selling wine? He shook his head as a grin spread wide. I'd like to know what he's really up to. Jennsen shrugged. Well, that's just what he's selling at the moment, of course. The three of them travel around buying goods, bringing them back to sell. He laughed at that and slapped her shoulder. That sounds like he'd want it told. Small wonder he trusts you. Jennsen was completely confused and desperately didn't want to be dragged any further into a dangerous discussion about Tom, or she could soon be found out. She didn't really know much about Tom. This man apparently did. I guess I'd better see this fellow you have. If it is Sebastian, I need to kick his tail and get him on his way. Right, Captain Lerner said with a firm nod. If he is your man, at least I'll finally know his name. He turned to the iron-bound door as he rooted around in his pocket for a key. If it is him, he's lucky you came for him before one of them women in red showed up to ask him questions. He'd be spouting more than his name then. He'd have saved himself and you a lot of trouble if he'd have told us what he was about in the first place. Jennsen felt giddy relief to hear that a moored Sith hadn't tortured Sebastian. When you're doing Lord Rahl's business, you keep your mouth shut, she said. Sebastian knows the price of our work. The captain grunted his agreement as he turned the key. The latch unlocked with a cavernous clang. For this, Lord Rahl, I'd keep my mouth shut, even if it was a moored Sith asking the questions. But you'd have to know the new Lord Rahl better than I, so I guess I don't need to tell you. Jennsen didn't understand, but didn't ask anything either. As the captain tugged on the door, it slowly swung open, revealing a long hallway lit by a few candles along the length of the corridor. To each side were doors with small barred openings. As they passed some of those openings, as many as half a dozen arms stretched out, imploring, reaching, grabbing. From the darkness through others came the clamor of voices calling out vile curses and oaths. From the reaching hands and the collection of voices, she knew that each room beyond held groups of men. Jennsen followed behind the captain deeper into the fortress prison. When eyes peered out and saw it was a woman, the men called out obscenely to her. She was shocked by the lewd and vulgar things yelled at her, the jeering laughter. She hid her feelings, her fears, and wore a calm mask. Captain Lerner kept to the center of the passageway, occasionally batting aside a reaching hand. "Watch yourself," he cautioned. Jennsen was about to ask why when someone threw something sloppy at her. It missed, splattering on the opposite wall. She was appalled to see that it was feces. Several more men joined in. Jennsen had to duck and dodge to miss it. The captain suddenly kicked a door of a man about to throw more. The bang of the kick echoed up and down the corridor, serving as warning enough to cause men to retreat back into the depths of their cells. Only when the glaring captain was sure his threat was understood did he start out once again. Jennsen couldn't help but to ask in a whisper, "What are all of these men accused of?" The captain glanced back over his shoulder. "Various things, murder, rape, things like that. A few are spies, the kind of men you're hunting." The stench of the place gagged her. The raw hatred of the prisoners was understandable, she supposed, but no matter how much she sympathized with captives of Lord Rahl's soldiers, men fighting against his brutal rule, their behavior only served to support any accusations of perversity. Jennsen stayed close to Captain Lerner's heels as he turned down a side passageway. From a shelf built into the stone, he collected a lamp, then lit it from a nearby candle. The light from the lamp only served to throw a little more light into a nightmare and make it all the more frightening. She had terrifying visions of being found out and ending up in this place. She couldn't keep from imagining being locked in a room with men like these. She knew what they would do to her. Jennsen had to remind herself to slow her breathing. Another door had to be unlocked, taking them beyond to a low passageway with doors spaced much closer. She guessed that they were cells holding a single man. A grasping hand, grimy and covered with open sores, shot out of an opening to catch her cloak. She shrugged the hand off her and kept moving. Captain Lerner unlocked another door at the end, and they entered a space smaller yet, hardly wider than his shoulders. The twisting, cramped opening, like a fissure in the rock, made Jennsen's skin crawl. No hands reached out of the door openings in this place. The captain stopped and held up the lamp to look through the small hole in the door to the right. Satisfied with what he saw, he handed her the lamp and then unlocked the door. "We put special prisoners in this section," he explained. He had to use both hands and all his weight to pull on the door. It moved with grating protest. Inside, Jennsen was surprised to see it was only a tiny empty room with a second door. That was why there were no hands reaching in this hall. The cells had double doors, to make escape even more improbable. After unlocking the second door, he took back the lamp. The captain ducked through the short doorway, pushing the light in before him, his bulk in the door momentarily throwing her into the darkness. Once through, he extended a hand out to help her so she wouldn't trip over the high sill. Jennsen held the man's big hand and stepped into the cell. It was larger than she expected, looking to be carved out of the solid stone of the plateau. Tooled gouges in the rock walls testified to how difficult the work had been. No prisoner was going to dig his way out of such a secure place. On a bench carved in the opposite wall sat Sebastian. His blue eyes were on her from the instant she entered. In those eyes, she thought she could see how much he wanted out. Nevertheless, he showed no emotion and said nothing. From outward appearances, no one would even know that he knew her. He had neatly folded his cloak and used it as a cushion on the cold stone. Nearby sat a water cup. His clothes were orderly, showing no evidence that they abused him. It was good to see his face, his eyes, his spikes of white hair again. He licked his lips, his beautiful lips that so often had smiled at her. Now, though, he dared not smile. Jennsen had been right. She did want to fall on him, to throw her arms around him, to wail with her relief at seeing him alive and unhurt. The captain gestured with his lamp. "This him?" "Yes, Captain." Sebastian's eyes were fixed on her as she stepped forward. She had to pause to be sure she had her voice under control. "It's all right, Sebastian. Captain Lerner here knows you're one of my team." She patted the handle of her knife. "You can trust him to keep your identity confidential." Captain Lerner extended a hand. "Glad to meet you, Sebastian. Sorry about the mix-up. We didn't know who you were." "Jennsen explained your mission. I used to serve, so I understand the need for secrecy." Sebastian rose to his feet and clasped hands with the man. "No harm done, Captain. I can't fault our men for doing their job." Sebastian didn't know her plan. He appeared to be waiting for her lead. She gestured impatiently and asked a question she knew he wouldn't be able to answer, and in that way let him know what it was she intended him to say. "Did you make contact with any of the infiltrators before you were stopped by the guards? Did you find out who any of them are and gain their confidence? Did you at least get any names?" Sebastian took her lead and sighed convincingly. "I'm sorry, no. I'd only just arrived and didn't have a chance before the guards." His gaze drifted to the floor. "Sorry." Captain Lerner's eyes shifted between the two of them. Jennsen assumed a tone of forbearance. "Well, I can't blame guards for not taking chances in the palace. We need to be on our way, though. I made some headway in our search and uncovered some important new contacts. It can't wait. These men are wary, and I need you to approach them. They aren't likely to let a woman buy them drinks. They'd get the wrong idea. So I'm going to leave it to you. I've got other snares to set." Sebastian was nodding as if he were entirely familiar with the imaginary work. "All right." The captain held an arm out. "Let's get you both on your way, then." Sebastian, following Jennsen out, glanced back. "I'll need my weapons, Captain, and all the coins that were in the purse. That's Lord Rahl's money, and I need it to do his bidding." "I have it all. Nothing is missing. My word on that." Outside, in the confining passageway, Captain Lerner pulled the cell door shut. He had the light, so Jennsen and Sebastian waited on him. As she started out, the captain gently reached past Sebastian to grasp her arm, stopping her. Jennsen froze, fearing to breathe. She felt Sebastian's hand slip around her waist to the handle of her knife. "Is it true what people say?" the captain asked. Jennsen looked back into his eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean about Lord Rahl, about how he's, I don't know, different. I've heard men talk, men who have met him, fought with him. They talk about how he handles that sword of his, how he fights and all. But more than that, they talk about him as a man. Is it true what they say?" Jennsen didn't know what he meant. She feared to move, to say anything, not knowing how to answer such a question. She didn't know what people, especially Daharan soldiers, said about the new Lord Rahl. She knew that she and Sebastian could kill this man, here, now. They would have the element of surprise. Sebastian, with his hand on her knife, was surely thinking that very thing. But they would still have to make it out of the palace. If they killed him, it was likely that the body would soon be discovered. The Daharan soldiers were anything but lax. Even if they hid the dead captain of the prison guards, a check of the prisoners would soon reveal that Sebastian was missing. Their chances of escaping then became remote. Worse, though, she didn't think she could kill this man. Despite the fact that he was a Daharan officer, she held no ill feeling for him. He seemed a decent sort, not a monster. Tom liked him, and the captain respected Tom. Stabbing a man who was trying to kill them was one thing. This would be entirely different. She couldn't do this. "We would lay down our lives for the man," Sebastian said in an earnest voice. "I'd have let you torture and kill me before I would have said a word, for fear it would endanger Lord Rahl."
I, too, Jennsen added in a soft voice, think of little else but Lord Rahl. I even dream about him. She had spoken the truth, but a truth calculated to deceive. The captain smiled, staring off with an inner satisfaction as his fingers released her arm. Jennsen felt Sebastian's hand slip away from her knife. I guess that tells it plain, the captain said in the near darkness. I've served a long time. I had lost hope of daring to dream such a thing. He hesitated, then spoke again. And his wife? Is she really a confessor, like they say? I've heard tales about the confessors, from back before the boundaries, but I never knew if it was really true. Wife? Jennsen didn't know anything about Lord Rahl having a wife. Jennsen couldn't picture him with a wife, or imagine what such a woman would be like. Jennsen couldn't even conceive of why the Lord Rahl, a man who could possess any woman he wanted and then discard her at will, would bother to take a wife. And what a confessor could be was a complete mystery to Jennsen. But the very title, confessor, certainly sounded ominous. Sorry, Jennsen said. I've not met her. Nor I, Sebastian said. But I've heard much the same about her as you have. The captain smiled distantly. I'm glad I've lived to see a Lord Rahl like this finally come to command Dahara, as it should be commanded. Jennsen started out again, troubled by the man's words, troubled that he was pleased this new Lord Rahl was going to conquer and rule the whole world in the name of Dahara. Jennsen was eager to get out of the prison and out of the palace. The three of them moved quickly back through the narrow passageways, back through iron doors, and past the reaching prisoners. The captain's growled warning silenced them this time. When they rushed through the last iron-bound door before the stairs, they all came to an abrupt halt. A tall, attractive woman with a single long blonde braid stood waiting for them, blocking their escape route. The look on her face was lightning waiting to strike. She was wearing red leather. It could be nothing other than a Mord Sith. Chapter 27. The woman's hands were clasped casually behind her back. Her expression was anything but casual. Boot strikes echoed off the stone walls as she stepped forward, a dark thundercloud approaching, a thundercloud that didn't know fear. A wave of gooseflesh tingled up Jennsen's body from her knees to the nape of her neck, where downy hair stiffened. In a steady, measured pace, the woman strode one full turn around them, looking them up and down, a hawk circling, inspecting mice. Jennsen saw an Aegil, the weapon of a Mord Sith, hanging from a fine chain at the woman's right wrist. Lethal as Jennsen knew such a weapon could be, it looked like nothing more than a thin leather rod, not a foot in length. A very agitated official came to see me, the Mord Sith said in a quiet, silken voice. Her deadly glare moved very deliberately from Sebastian to Jennsen. He thought I needed to come down here and see what was going on. He mentioned a woman with red hair. He seemed to think she might be trouble of some sort. What do you think he was so worried about? The captain, who was behind Jennsen, stepped out to the side. There's nothing going on that you need concern yourself. With a flick of her wrist, the Aegil spun up into her fist and was pointing at the captain's face. I didn't ask you. I asked this young woman. The glare turned back to Jennsen. Why do you suppose he would say that I needed to come down here, Jennsen. Because, Jennsen said, unable to look away from the cold blue eyes, he's a pompous dolt, and he didn't like it that I wouldn't pretend he wasn't just because he wore white robes. The Mord Sith smiled. It was not humor, but grim respect for the veracity of what Jennsen had said. The smile evaporated as she glanced at Sebastian. When her gaze returned to Jennsen, it looked as if it could cut steel. Pompous or not, that doesn't change the fact that there is a prisoner being released for no more cause than your word. Jennsen. My word is sufficient. Jennsen irritably lifted the knife at her belt and flashed the handle at the woman. This backs my word. That, the Mord Sith said in her silken hiss, means nothing. Jennsen could feel her face going red. It means, do you think we're stupid? The Mord Sith's skin-tight red leather creaked as she leaned closer. That if you come in here and merely wave that knife handle in our faces,
that our faculty of reason will evaporate. The tight leather outfit revealed a body as shapely as it was powerful. Jennsen felt small and ugly before this flawless creature. Worse, she felt totally inadequate faking a story before a woman as confident as this woman was, a woman who seemed able to see right through their invented tale. But Jennsen knew that if she dared to waver now, she and Sebastian were as good as dead. Jennsen put as much of an edge to her voice as she could manage. I carry this knife for Lord Rahl in his name, and you will yield to it. Really? Why? Because this knife shows the trust Lord Rahl has placed in me. Ah, so just because you happen to carry it, we're supposed to believe that Lord Rahl gave it to you? That he trusts you? How are we to know you didn't find the knife? Find it? Are you out of your... Or perhaps you and this prisoner here ambushed the knife's true owner, murdered him for no reason but to get your hands on a coveted object, hoping it would give you credibility. I don't know how you can possibly believe such a... Or maybe you're a coward and murdered the knife's owner in his sleep? Or maybe you didn't even have that much courage, and you bought it from cutthroats who murdered him. Is that what you did? Simply got it from the real murderer? Of course not. The moored Sith leaned closer yet, until Jennsen could feel the woman's breath on her own face. Maybe you enticed the man it belonged to into lying between your sweet legs while your partner here stole it. Or maybe you're just a whore, and it was the gift of a murderous thief in exchange for your womanly favors. Jennsen backed away. I wouldn't... Showing us such a weapon proves nothing. The fact is, we don't know who the knife belongs to. Surrender. It's mine, Jennsen insisted. The moored Sith straightened and lifted an eyebrow. Really? The captain folded his arms. Sebastian, standing to Jennsen's side, didn't move. Jennsen fought to contain tears of panic trying to surface. She endeavored to show a defiant face instead. Jennsen, surrender. I have important business on behalf of Lord Rahl, Jennsen said through gritted teeth. I don't have time for this. Ah, the moored Sith mocked. Business on behalf of Lord Rahl. Well, that does sound important. She folded her arms. What business? It's my affair, not yours. The cool smile returned. Magic business? That it? Magic? It's not any of your concern. I'm doing Lord Rahl's bidding, and you would do well to remember that. He'd not be pleased to know you were meddling. The eyebrow lifted again. Meddling? My dear young lady, it is impossible for a moored Sith to meddle. If you were who you say you are, you would know that much at least. Moored Sith exist only to protect Lord Rahl. It would be a dereliction of my duty, don't you think, were I to ignore such curious goings-on? No, I told you. And if Lord Rahl finds himself bleeding his life away and asks me what happened, before he dies, I can tell him that a girl with a pretty knife danced in here and demanded to have a very suspicious and tight-lipped prisoner released. And, well, we were so dazzled by the knife and by her big blue eyes that we all just thought we ought to let her have her way. That about it? Of course you have to do some magic for me. The moored Sith reached out and tested some of Jennsen's red hair between a finger and thumb. A bit of magic to prove yourself. A spell, a charm, a dazzling show of your craft. Call some lightning down, if you will. If not that, maybe then just a simple flame fluttering in midair. I don't do some magic, witch. Her voice was a deadly command. Surrender. Angry at the voice, but more so at the moored Sith, Jennsen slapped the hand away from her hair. Stop it! Faster than seemed possible, Sebastian went for the woman. Faster yet, her aegil spun into her hand. She rammed the tip against Sebastian's shoulder as he was still flying at her. Sebastian cried out as the weapon stopped him cold. The woman calmly pressed the aegil against his shoulder, driving him to the ground. Sebastian screamed as he lay crumpled on the floor. Jennsen rushed toward the moored Sith. In one swift movement, the woman stood and had the aegil before Jennsen's face, halting her. At their feet, Sebastian writhed in agony. Thinking only of Sebastian, only of getting to him, only of helping him, Jennsen grabbed the aegil,
pushing it and the woman's hand away. She went to one knee beside Sebastian. He had rolled to his side, holding himself, trembling as if he'd been struck by lightning. He calmed under her gentle touch as she told him to lie still. As he recovered somewhat and tried to sit up, Jennsen put an arm behind his shoulders and helped him. He leaned against her, panting, clearly suffering from the lingering effects of the pain of the weapon. He blinked, trying to clear his watering eyes, struggling to focus his vision. Jennsen, horrified by what the touch of the Aegeal could do, stroked a hand down Sebastian's face. She lifted his chin, trying to see if he recognized her, if he was all right. He could hardly sit up on his own, but he gave her a little nod. "Stand up," the moored Sith towered over them. "Both of you." Sebastian couldn't yet. Jennsen shot to her feet, defiantly facing the woman. "I'll not tolerate this. When I tell Lord Rahl about this, he'll have you horsewhipped." The woman was frowning. She held the Aegeal out. "Touch it." Again, Jennsen seized the weapon and shoved it aside. "Stop it." "It works," the moored Sith muttered to herself. "I know it does. I can feel it." She turned and experimentally pressed the awful thing to the captain's arm. He cried out and went to his knees. "Stop it!" Jennsen caught hold of the red rod, pulling it back away from the captain. The moored Sith stared. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Touch it without being hurt. No one is immune to the touch of an Aegeal, not even Lord Rahl himself." Jennsen realized then that something unprecedented had happened. She didn't understand it, but she knew that while the situation was confused, she had to seize the opportunity. "You wanted to see magic, you saw it. But how? Do you think that Lord Rahl would allow me to carry the knife if I wasn't competent?" "But an Aegeal—" The captain was coming to his feet. "What's the matter with you? I fight for the same cause as you." "And that cause is protecting Lord Rahl," the woman snapped. She held her Aegeal up. "This is my means of protecting him. I have to know what's wrong, lest I fail him." Jennsen reached up and curled her fingers around the weapon, holding it tight as she met the moored Sith's gaze. She told herself that she had to remember who she was supposed to be and to maintain the pretense. She tried to think of what she would do if she really were one of Lord Rahl's elite. "I understand your concern," Jennsen said with resolve, determined not to miss her unexpected chance, even if she didn't fully understand it herself. "I know you want to protect Lord Rahl. We share that devotion and sacred duty. Our lives are his. I have vital business doing the same as you, protecting Lord Rahl. You don't know all that's involved in this, and I don't have the time to even begin to explain it to you. I've had enough of this. Lord Rahl's life is in danger. I have no more time to spare. If you don't let me do my job of protecting him, then you are imperiling him, and I will remove you as I would any threat to his life." The moored Sith considered Jennsen's words. What she could be thinking, Jennsen had no idea, but that very notion, thought, was one Jennsen had never ascribed to the moored Sith. She had always considered them to be mindless killers. In this woman's eyes, Jennsen could see cognition. Finally, the moored Sith reached down and with a hand under Sebastian's arm, helped him to his feet. When he was standing steadily, she turned back to Jennsen. "I'd gladly suffer the horsewhipping, and far worse, if it would help protect this Lord Rahl. Get going, and be quick about it." She gave Jennsen a small but warm smile, and then a firm clap on the side of the shoulder. "May the good spirits be with you." She hesitated. "But I need to know how it is that you don't feel the power of an Aegeal. Such a thing is simply not possible." Jennsen was taken aback that a person this evil dared to invoke the name of the good spirits. Jensen's mother was a good spirit now. "I'm sorry, but that's part of what I have no time to begin to tell you. And besides, Lord Rahl's safety hinges on me keeping it secret." The woman stared long and hard. "I am Naida," she said at last. "Swear to me, personally, that you will do as you say and protect him." "I swear, Naida. Now I have to go. I can't spare any more time, not for anything." Before Jennsen could move, the moored Sith seized a fistful of her dress and cloak at her shoulder. "This is one Lord Rahl we cannot afford to lose, or we all lose everything. If I ever find out you're lying to me, I promise you two things. First, there will never be a hole deep enough for you to hide in that I won't find you. And second, your death will be beyond anyone's worst nightmare. Do I make myself clear?"
Jennsen could only nod dumbly at the look of fierce resolve in Nida's eyes. The woman turned and started up the steps. "Get going, then." "Are you all right?" the captain asked Sebastian. Sebastian brushed dirt off his knees as he headed for the steps. "I'd have rather had the horsewhipping than that, but I guess I'll live." The captain grimaced his sympathy as he comforted his own arm. "I have your things up there locked away, your weapons and your money." "Lord Rahl's money," Sebastian corrected. Jennsen wanted nothing so much as to be out of the palace. She hurried up the steps, forcing herself not to break into a dead run. "Oh," the Mordsith called back down the steps. She had paused, her hand on the rusty rail as they rushed up after her. "I forgot to tell you." "Forgot to tell us what?" Jennsen asked. "We're in a hurry." "That official who came to get me? The one in white robes?" "Yes?" Jennsen asked as she reached the woman. "After he came for me, he was going to go looking for Wizard Rahl, to bring him down to see you too." Jennsen felt the blood drain from her face. "Lord Rahl is far to the south," the captain scoffed as he came up the stairs behind them. "Not Lord Rahl," Nida said. "Wizard Rahl. Wizard Nathan Rahl." Chapter 28. Jennsen remembered that name. Nathan Rahl. Althea had said she met him in the old world at the Palace of the Prophets. He was a real Rahl, she said. She said he was powerful and inconceivably dangerous, so they kept him locked away behind impenetrable shields of magic where he could cause no harm, yet he sometimes still managed it. Althea had said that Nathan Rahl was over 900 years old. Somehow the old wizard had escaped those impenetrable shields of magic. Jennsen seized the Mordsith by the elbow. "Nida, what's he doing here?" "I don't know. I've not met him." "It's important he not see us." Jennsen nudged Nida ahead, urging her to hurry. "I don't have time to explain, but he's dangerous." At the top of the stairs, Nida looked both ways before meeting Jensen's gaze. "Dangerous? Are you sure about this?" "Yes." "All right. Come with me, then." "I need my things," Sebastian said. "Here," the captain pointed at a door not far away. While Nida stood guard, Sebastian followed Captain Lerner inside. Jennsen, her knees trembling, stood in the doorway watching as the captain set the lamp down and unlocked a second door inside. He and Sebastian went into the room beyond, taking the lamp. Jennsen could hear brief words and the sounds of things being dragged off shelves. With every passing moment, Jennsen could almost hear the wizard's footsteps bringing him ever closer. If he caught them, Sebastian's weapons would do them no good. If Wizard Rahl saw them, he would recognize Jennsen for what she was, a hole in the world, the ungifted offspring of Darken Rahl. There would be no bluffing her way out of that. They would have her at last. Sebastian emerged ahead of the captain. "Let's go." He simply looked like a man in a dark green cloak, the same as before. Few would suspect the collection of weapons he carried. His blue eyes and spikes of white hair made him look different from other people. Maybe that was why the guards had stopped him. Page 264. The captain caught Jennsen by the arm. "As she said," he nodded toward the Mordsith, "may the good spirits be with you always." He handed her the lamp. Jennsen whispered her sincere gratitude before rushing to follow the other two down the passageway, leaving the captain of the guards behind. Nida led them down dark halls and through empty rooms. They raced through a narrow cleft without a ceiling. At least when Jennsen looked up, she could see nothing but darkness above. The floor appeared to be bedrock. The wall to the right was rather unremarkable fitted stone. To the left, though, the passageway was lined with colossal speckled pink granite blocks. Each smooth-faced block was larger than any house Jennsen had ever lived in, yet the joints were so tight that no blade could have slipped between them. At the end of the passageway, beside the huge stone blocks, they ducked through a low door and out onto a narrow walkway made of iron and laid with planks to cross on. The thread of a footbridge spanned a wide chasm in the bedrock of the plateau. Jennsen could see by the light of her lamp that the walls of sheer rock to each side dropped straight down, fading away far below. The light of the lamp wasn't enough for her to see the bottom. Standing there on the slender stretch of walkway suspended over the enormous void made her feel as tiny as an ant. The Mordsith, a hand on the iron rail as she moved across the bridge, paused and looked back over her shoulder. "Why is Wizard Rahl dangerous?" It was obvious that the question had been playing on her mind. "What trouble can he cause you?"
The brittle tone of her voice reverberated off the surrounding rock walls. Stopped there in the center of the walkway over the black abyss, Jennsen could feel the bridge swaying underfoot. It was making her dizzy. The moored Sith waited. Jennsen tried to think of something to say. A glance back at Sebastian's blank expression told her that he had no ideas. She quickly decided to mix in some of the truth in case Nida knew anything about the man. He's a prophet. He escaped from a place where he was held, a place where he couldn't hurt anyone. They had him there because he's dangerous. The moored Sith pulled her long blonde braid over her shoulder, drawing her hand down its length as she considered Jennsen's words. She clearly didn't intend to move yet. I've heard he's quite an interesting man. In her eyes was awakened challenge. He's dangerous, Jennsen insisted. Why? He can harm my mission. How? I've already said it. He's a prophet. Prophecy could be a benefit. It might help you in your mission to protect Lord Rahl. The moored Sith's frown darkened. Why wouldn't you want such help? Jennsen recalled what Althea said about prophecy. He might tell me how I'll die, even the very day. What if you were the one who had to protect Lord Rahl against an approaching threat, and you knew that the very next day you were going to die in some horrifying fashion, knew the exact hour, the agonizing details? It might put you in a state of paralyzing fear, and in that panic of knowing exactly when and how you were to die, you would naturally be ill-suited to protect Lord Rahl's life. Nida's frown eased only slightly. Do you really think that Wizard Rahl would tell you such a thing? Why do you think they had him locked away? He's dangerous. Prophecy could be dangerous for those like me who protect Lord Rahl. Or maybe it could help, Nida said. If you knew that something bad was going to happen, you could stop it. Then it wouldn't be prophecy, now would it? Nida ran her hand down her braid as she considered the implications. But if you knew of some dire foretelling, then maybe you could turn the prophecy aside and avert the disaster. If you could turn prophecy aside, that would make it wrong. If it were wrong, if it were prophecy unfulfilled, then it would just be the foolish, empty words of an old man, wouldn't it? Then how could prophecy be distinguished from the ranting of any lunatic who claimed he was a prophet? But it's not empty ranting, Jennsen insisted. It's prophecy. If this prophet wanted to harm my mission, he might tell me something terrible about my future. If I knew something terrible, I might fail Lord Rahl. You mean, Nida asked, that you think it would be like if I were to jab my Aegil at someone? It would make them flinch? Yes, only if we know a prophecy and flinch, as it were, it's Lord Rahl who would be put at risk because of our weakness and fear. Nida released her braid and put her hand back on the railing. But I would not flinch knowing how I was to die, especially if it was Lord Rahl's life I was saving. As a moored Sith, I'm always prepared to die. Every moored Sith wishes to die fighting for the Lord Rahl, not old and toothless in bed. Jennsen wondered if the woman was mad, or if she could really be that dedicated. A brave boast, Sebastian put in. But are you willing to bet Lord Rahl's life on it? Nida looked him in the eye. If it were my life on the line, yes. I would not flinch knowing how and when I was to die. Then I admit that you're a better woman than I, Jennsen said. Nida nodded grimly. I would not expect you to be the same as I. You may carry the knife, but are not moored Sith. Jennsen wished Nida would move on. If she couldn't convince the woman and had to fight her, this would be a very bad place to have to do it. The moored Sith was strong and quick. With Sebastian behind, he could be little help. Besides that, hanging on to the swaying bridge over the chasm, Jensen's head was spinning. She didn't like high places and had never prided herself in her sense of balance. I'd do my best not to fail Lord Rahl in a situation like that, Jennsen said. But I can't swear I wouldn't. I'd not like Lord Rahl's life to hang on the answer. Nida nodded in resignation. That's wise. She finally turned and started out once more across the footbridge. I would still try to change the prophecy, though. Jennsen let out a silent sigh as she shuffled along, following close behind. In some manner she didn't understand, her words were swaying the moored Sith more than seemed possible. She glanced over the edge, but still saw no bottom. Prophecy can't be changed, or it would cease to be prophecy. Prophecy comes from prophets who are gifted with it. Nida had her braid over her shoulder again, stroking it. But if he is a prophet, then he knows the future, and like you said, that can't be changed, or it wouldn't be prophecy. So, he would only be telling you what is going to happen. He can't change it. You can't change it.
It's already going to happen whether he tells you or not. If telling you would make you fail to protect Lord Rahl, then he would already see such an event, so it is preordained to happen and would be part of the prophecy to begin with. Jennsen pulled a strand of her hair out of her eyes as she advanced along the bridge, gripping the rail tightly. In her mind, she furiously raced to come up with a logical answer. She had no idea if the things she was saying were true or not, but she thought they sounded convincing and seemed to be working. The problem was, Nida kept asking questions Jennsen had more and more trouble answering. She felt almost as if she were descending into the void below, each attempt to climb out only letting her slip deeper. She did her best to keep any trace of desperation out of her voice. But don't you see? Prophets don't see everything about everyone, as if the whole world and every single thing that happens is some grand play, to be acted out according to a script the prophet has already read. A prophet would only see some things, maybe even some things of his choosing. But other things, things he doesn't see, he might try to influence. Nida frowned back at them. What do you mean? Jennsen sensed that her only safety was to keep Nida worried for her Lord Rahl. I mean, if he wanted to harm Lord Rahl, he might tell me something that would make me flinch just to make me flinch, even if he didn't see such an event. Nida's frown grew more serious. You mean he might lie? Yes. But why would Wizard Rahl want to harm Lord Rahl? What possible reason would he have? I told you he's dangerous. That's why they had him locked away in the Palace of the Prophets. Who knows what other things they knew about him that we don't? Things that made them feel it was necessary to lock such a man away. That still doesn't answer why Wizard Rahl would wish to harm Lord Rahl. Jennsen felt as if she were in a knife fight, trying to protect herself from this woman's razor-sharp verbal blade. It's not just prophecy. He's a wizard. He's gifted. I don't know if he's interested in harming Lord Rahl. Maybe he's not. But I don't want to risk Lord Rahl's life to find out. I know enough about magic to know I don't like messing around with things of magic that are beyond me. I have to put Lord Rahl's life first. I'm not saying that I believe Nathan Rahl is bent on harm. I'm just saying that it's my job to protect Lord Rahl, and I don't want to take the chance with such magic. Magic I can't ward. The woman shouldered open the door at the end of the footbridge. I can't argue that. I don't like anything to do with magic. But if Lord Rahl is in danger from this prophet of a wizard, maybe you had better stay here so we can look into it. I don't know if Nathan Rahl represents a threat, but I have pressing business that I know for certain is a grave danger to Lord Rahl. My responsibility is to tend to that. Nida tried a door but found it locked. She continued on down the dingy hallway. But if your suspicions about Nathan Rahl are correct, then we must... Nida, I'm hoping you can keep your eye on this Nathan Rahl for me. I can't do it all myself. Watch him for me. Do you wish me to kill him? No. Jennsen was surprised at how ready the Mord Sith seemed to be to commit such an act. Of course not. I'm just saying to pay attention. Keep an eye on him, that's all. Nida reached another door. This time the lever lifted. Before she opened it, she turned back to the two of them. Jennsen didn't like the look in her eyes as her gaze shifted between them. This is all crazy, Nida said. Too much of it makes no sense. Too many things don't fit. I don't like it when things don't make sense. This was a dangerous creature who could at any moment turn on them. Jennsen had to find a way to close the subject for good. She remembered what Captain Lerner had said, how filled with conviction he had been, and spoke the words softly to Nida. The new Lord Rahl has changed everything, all the rules. He's turned the whole world upside down. Nida finally let out a deep breath. A wistful smile came to her lips. Yes, he has, she said in a soft voice. Wonder of wonders. That's why I would lay down my life to protect him. Why I worry so. Me too. I need to do my job. Nida turned away and led them to a dark spiral of stairs tunneling down through the rock. Jennsen knew that the tale she was spinning wasn't entirely convincing. She was perplexed that it worked anyway. A long journey down seemingly endless stairs and along dark corridors, occasionally cutting through passageways crowded with soldiers, took them ever lower in the plateau below the People's Palace. Sebastian's hand on her back for much of the journey was a reassuring comfort and a relief. Jennsen could hardly believe that she had managed to get him free. Soon they would be out of the palace and safely away. Somewhere within the interior of the plateau, they emerged into the central public area. Nida had taken them down a more direct route and saved them time. Jennsen preferred staying within the hidden passageways, but apparently those shortcuts ended at this place, within the common area. They would have to finish their descent among the crowds. Small stands selling food lined the way along the route as throngs of people shuffled past on their long ascent to the palace above. Jennsen recalled passing the vendors opposite the stone balusters overlooking the level below on her first visit to the palace. The smells after the dusty places they had been were temptation almost beyond endurance. Soldiers patrolling nearby noticed them on their way down, moving against the crowds. Like all the soldiers she had seen in the palace, these were big men, muscular, fit, eyes alert. In their leather and chain mail, weapons hanging from their belts, they were an intimidating sight. As soon as they realized that Nida was escorting them, the soldiers turned their scrutiny to other people. When Jennsen saw Sebastian pull up his hood, she realized it would be a good idea to hide her hair and followed suit. The air inside the plateau was frosty, and a number of people had their heads covered with hoods or hats, so it wouldn't raise suspicions. As they reached the far end of a long landing in the lower reaches inside the plateau, just as they turned to descend the next flight of stairs, Jennsen looked up. At the opposite end of the landing, a tall, older man with a full head of straight white hair hanging to his broad shoulders was just coming down off the stairs. Even though he was old, he was still a strikingly handsome man. Despite his age, he moved with vigor. He looked up. His gaze met Jennsen's. The world seemed to stop in the man's dark azure eyes. Jennsen froze. There was something about him that looked vaguely familiar, something in those eyes that seized her attention. Sebastian had stopped 2 steps below her. Nida was at her side. The moored Sith's gaze followed Jennsen's. The man's hawk-like glare was fixed on Jennsen, as if they were the only 2 people in the entire palace.
"Dear spirits," Nida whispered, "that has to be Nathan Rahl."
"How do you know?" Sebastian asked. She stepped up beside Jennsen, her attention fixed on the man.
"He has the eyes of a Rahl, of Darken Rahl. I've seen those eyes in enough nightmares."
Nida's gaze slid to Jennsen. Her brow drew together. Jennsen realized where she had seen the man's eyes. In the mirror. Chapter 29. In the distance, across the landing, Jennsen saw the wizard's eyes going wide. His hand came up, pointing across the throng of people. "Stop!" he called out in a deep, powerful voice. Even above the racket around her, Jennsen could clearly hear that voice ring out. "Stop!" Nida was staring at her, as if the spark of recognition was but an instant away. Jennsen seized her arm.
"Nida, you have to stop him."
Nida broke the gaze to look over her shoulder at the man rushing toward them. She looked back at Jennsen. Jennsen remembered Althea saying that she could see some Rahl in Jennsen's looks, and that others who knew Darken Rahl might recognize her. Jennsen gripped red leather in her fist.
"Stop him! Don't listen to anything he says!"
"But he might only—" Gripping the fistful of red leather tightly, Jennsen shook the woman.
"Haven't you heard anything I've said? He might keep me from helping Lord Rahl. He might try to trick you. Stop him! Please, Nida, Lord Rahl's life is in grave danger."
Invoking the name of Lord Rahl tipped the balance back.
"Go," Nida said. "Hurry."
Jennsen nodded and dashed down the steps. She only had time for a brief look. She saw the prophet's long legs striding toward them, his hand held out, calling for them to stop. Nida, a Jeel in her fist, ran for him. Jennsen scanned the area for soldiers, then turned back for a look, trying to see if Nathan Rahl was still coming, trying to see if Nida was stopping him. Sebastian snatched her hand, pulling her in a headlong rush down the steps. Jennsen didn't get a chance for another glimpse of her wizard kin. She hadn't realized how it would affect her to see someone who was related to her. She hadn't expected to see it in his eyes. There had only been her mother and her before. It was the strangest feeling, a kind of pensive longing, seeing this man who was in some way her blood. But if he caught her, her doom would be sealed. Together, she and Sebastian raced down the steps, dodging people who were on their way up. Some people grumbled at them to watch where they were going, or cursed them for running. At each landing, she and Sebastian skirted the crowds and flew down the next flight of stairs. When they reached a level where soldiers were stationed, they slowed. Jennsen pulled her hood up a little tighter, making sure that her hair was hidden, along with some of her face, fearing people might recognize her for being the daughter of Darken Rahl. Anxiety knotted her insides at having discovered that there was that, too, she now had to worry about. Sebastian's arm around her waist held her close as he wound his way through the flowing river of people. To avoid soldiers on patrol moving by near the balusters, he had to guide Jennsen to the side with benches, taking them closer among the stands, weaving through lines of people. The landing was choked with people buying trinkets and treasures of their visit to the People's Palace. The air was filled with the aroma of meats and spices from some of the stands. Couples sat on benches eating, drinking, smiling, talking excitedly. Others simply watched people pass. There were shadowy spaces between stands and pillars where some couples sat tight together on short benches, or, where there were no benches, stood close in the dark, cuddling, kissing. When Jennsen and Sebastian reached the edge of the landing, about to head down, they spotted a large patrol of soldiers coming up the steps. Sebastian hesitated. She knew he had to be thinking about the last time soldiers took notice of him. This was a large group. It would be impossible to pass them without being within an arm's length. As they marched up the steps, the men looked carefully at everyone. Jennsen doubted that she would ever again be able to talk Sebastian out of a prison cell. It was likely, since she was with him, that this time they might take her in to be questioned. If they detained her, Nathan Rahl would seal her fate. She felt a sense of panic, of doom, closing in on her. Jennsen, not wanting to separate from Sebastian, instead grabbed his arm and pulled him back across the landing, past couples on benches, past those in lines at counters, past people standing back in the shadows, embracing, and into one of the dark, empty niches. Panting from the effort of their long run, she put her shoulders into the narrow nook back between the rear of a stand and a pillar. She drew Sebastian around in front of her so that his back would be to the soldiers. With his hood up as it was, they wouldn't see much of him. If they noticed them at all, they would only see enough to notice she was a woman. They would look like nothing more than a couple of completely unremarkable people. Jennsen put her arms around Sebastian's waist so they would look like any of the other ordinary couples spending a few moments alone with each other. It was quieter back in their small sanctuary. The sound of their heavy breathing drowned out the voices not far away. Most people couldn't see them, and the ones who could have were turned to other things. It had made Jennsen uncomfortable and awkward to watch couples snuggled together as she and Sebastian were now, so she imagined it would be the same for other people. It looked to her that she was right. No one paid any attention to a young couple embracing and obviously wanting to be by themselves. Sebastian's hands were on her waist. Her hands held his back so that they would look the part as they waited for the soldiers to pass. She was grateful beyond words that the good spirits had helped her get Sebastian out. "I never thought I'd see you again," he whispered, for the first time alone with her since he'd been released, for the first time able to say what he wanted. Jennsen looked away from the passing people into his eyes and saw how earnest he was. "I couldn't leave you there." He shook his head. "I can't believe what you did. I can't believe how you talked your way into that place. You had them wrapped around your will. How did you manage such a thing?" Jennsen swallowed, feeling at the edge of tears from the rush of emotion, the fear, the elation, the panic, the triumph. "I had to, that's all. I had to get you out." She checked to be sure that no one was near before she went on. "I couldn't stand the thought of you being in there, or of what they might do to you. I went to Althea, the sorceress, for help." "That's how you managed it then, her magic?" Jennsen shook her head as she gazed up into his eyes. "No, Althea couldn't help me. It's a long story." "She told me how she's been to your homeland, to the old world." She smiled. "Like I said, it's a long story for another time. It has to do with the pillars of creation." One eyebrow lifted. "You mean she's actually been there?" "What?" "The pillars of creation. She really went there when she was in the old world?" His gaze followed a distant soldier for a moment. "You said it has something to do with how she helped you. She actually saw the place?" "What? No, she couldn't help me. She said that I had to do it on my own. I was terrified for you. I didn't know what to do. Then I remembered what you told me about bluffing." Jennsen frowned with a curious squint. "What do you mean about her seeing the—" But then her words, her very thought, trailed off as he gazed into her eyes and smiled that wonderful smile of his. "I've never seen anyone pull off anything like that." It felt unexpectedly wonderful knowing that she had surprised him, pleased him. His arms felt so good, so powerful. Pressed back into the shadows, he was holding her close.
She could feel his warm breath on her cheek. "Sebastian, I was so afraid. I was so afraid I'd never see you again. I was so afraid for you." "I know. Were you afraid, too?" He nodded. "I could only think about how I'd never see you again." His face was so close, she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. She could feel the entire length of his body, his legs, his torso, pressed against her as his lips gently brushed hers. Her heart pounded at a furious pace. But then he pulled back as if having second thoughts. She was thankful for his arms because, realizing that he had almost kissed her, she wasn't sure her legs would hold her up just then. What a heady notion a kiss stolen in the shadows like this would have been. Almost a kiss. Feet shuffled past nearby, but the people seemed miles away. Jennsen felt completely alone with Sebastian, weak in his arms, safe in his arms. He drew her closer then, as if overcome, as if he was in the grip of something he could no longer control. She saw in his eyes a kind of helpless surrender. He kissed her. Jennsen stood rock still, surprised that he was actually doing it, kissing her, holding her in his arms, just like she had seen lovers doing. And then her arms tightened, and she was holding him, too, kissing him back. She had never imagined that anything could feel so wonderfully intoxicating. In all her life, Jennsen had never thought such a thing could happen to her. She had dreamed of it, of course, but she knew it was only a fantasy, something for other people. She never thought it could happen to her, to Jennsen Rahl. And now, magically, it was. A helpless moan escaped her throat as he held her tight, hugging her fiercely, kissing her with passionate abandon. She was acutely aware of his arm encircling the small of her back, his other arm behind her shoulders, her breasts mashed against the hard muscles of his chest, his mouth pressed to hers, his own needful moan in answer to hers. Unexpectedly, it ended. It was almost as if he had recovered his composure and forced himself back. Jennsen panted, catching her breath. She liked the way it felt to be held by him. Inches apart, they gazed into each other's eyes. It was all so startling, so quick, so unexpected, so confusing, so right. She wanted to melt into another embrace, another delicious kiss, but when he checked who was around, who might be watching, she gathered herself, remembering where they were and why they were pressed back into the dark niche. Nathan Rahl was after them. Only Nida stood between them. If he told her who Jennsen was, and she believed him, then the entire army would be after them. They had to get out of the palace. When Sebastian pulled away from her, doubts washed into the void. His gaze swept the crowd as he looked to make sure no one was watching them. "Let's go." His hand found hers, and he was suddenly pulling her away from the sanctuary of the shadowy fold in the palace. Jennsen felt lightheaded with a flood of confusing emotions, everything from fear and shame to giddy excitement. He had kissed her, a real kiss, a man-woman kiss. Her, Jennsen Rahl, the most hunted woman in Dahara. She almost didn't notice the steps as they descended. She tried to look normal, to look like any other person simply leaving the palace after a visit. She didn't feel normal, though. She felt as if everyone who looked at her would know that he had just kissed her. When a soldier unexpectedly turned their way, she held Sebastian's arm in both hands, pressing her head to his shoulder, and smiled at the man as if in casual greeting. It was enough of a distraction that they passed him and were away before he even thought to look at Sebastian. That was quick thinking, Sebastian whispered, letting out a breath. Once past the soldier, they picked up their pace again. The sights she had seen on the way in were now a blur. She didn't care about any of it. She just wanted out. She wanted away from the place where they had imprisoned Sebastian, where the two of them were in constant danger. She was more exhausted from the unremitting tension of being in the place than she had been from the dangers in the swamp. At last, the stairs finally ended. The light coming in the huge maw of the grand entrance made it difficult to see, but the opening out of the plateau was a welcome sight. Together, hand in hand, they rushed toward the light. Crowds of people milled about, stopping at stands, watching passers-by, gawking at the size of the place, while still others flowed past on their way up to the stairs. Soldiers near the sides watched people going in, so she and Sebastian moved toward the middle. The soldiers didn't seem as interested in those leaving as those entering. Cold daylight greeted them outside the Tower of Rock. The marketplace below the plateau was a bustle of activity, just as it had been before. The makeshift streets past the tents and stands teemed with people looking or sometimes stopping to make a purchase. Others moved toward the entrance to the people's palace, with business, with hopes, with small goods, with money.
Hawkers strolled among the visitors, calling out the wonders of their wares. She had told him that the horses and Betty were missing, so Sebastian led her instead to a nearby enclosure filled with horses of every variety. The man watching the horses was sitting on a crate that made up part of the rope fence, rubbing his arms in the cold. Saddles sat in a line along the edge of the makeshift fence. "We'd like to buy some horses," Sebastian said as he approached, checking the condition of the animals. The man looked up, squinting in the sunlight. "Good for you." "Well, are you selling or not?" "Not," the man said. He turned and spat. With the back of his hand, he wiped his chin. "These horses belong to people. I'm paid to watch them, not to sell them. I go selling someone's horse, I'm liable to be skinned alive." "Do you know who might sell horses?" "Sorry, can't say as I do. Check around." They thanked him and moved down the makeshift streets looking for open areas where horses might be picketed. Jennsen didn't mind walking. That was usually how she and her mother traveled, but she understood Sebastian's urgency to find a horse. With such a narrow escape, and then with the wizard Nathan Rahl trying to stop them, they needed to get far away from the people's palace as fast as they could. At a second place, they got the same answer as the first. Jennsen was hungry and wished she could get something to eat, but she knew that they would be better off making good their escape than lingering to have a meal and end up dying on a full stomach. Sebastian, holding her hand tight, pulled her between stands, cutting across the crowded streets toward horses picketed in a dusty enclosure. "You able to sell horses?" Sebastian asked a man watching over them. The man, his arms folded, was leaning against a post. "No, I've none to sell." Sebastian nodded. "Thanks anyway." The man caught Sebastian's cloak before they moved on. He leaned closer. "You be leaving the area?" Sebastian shrugged. "Going back south. Thought we'd like to pick up a horse while we were visiting the palace." The man leaned out a little and checked both ways. "After dark, come see me. Plan on being around that long? I may be able to help you." Sebastian nodded. "I have some business that will keep me here the day. I'll be back after it's dark." He took Jennsen's arm and moved her down the crowded street. They had to step out of the way of two sisters fawning over necklaces they'd bought as the father walked behind with a load of goods they had purchased. The mother watched her girls as she pulled a couple of sheep along behind. It gave Jennsen a pang of heartache for Betty. "Are you crazy?" she whispered at Sebastian, confused as to why he would tell the man that they would be back after dark. "We can't stay here all day." "Of course we can't. The man is a cutthroat. Since I had to ask if he was selling horses, he knows I have the money to buy one and would like to relieve me of it. If we go back there after dark, he'll likely have friends hiding in the shadows waiting to do us in." "He's a thief? Are you serious?" "This place is full of thieves." Sebastian leaned in with a stern look. "This is Dahara, a land where the greedy and perverse prey on the weak, where people care nothing about the welfare of their fellow man and even less about the future of mankind." Jennsen understood what he meant. On their way to the people's palace, Sebastian had told her about Brother Nariv and his teachings, his hope for a future where mankind's lot was not suffering, a future where there was no starvation or sickness or cruelty, where every man cared for his fellow man. Sebastian said that, along with the help of Jagang the Just and the will of good and decent people, the Fellowship of Order would help to bring it about. Jennsen had trouble imagining such a wonderful world, a world away from Lord Rahl. "But if that man was a thief, why would you tell him that you'll come back?" "Because if I didn't, if I told him I couldn't wait, then he might signal his partners. We wouldn't know who they are, but they would know us and likely find a spot they could surprise us." "You really think so?" "Like I said, the place is full of thieves. Watch yourself, or you might get your purse cut right off your belt without even knowing it." She was just about to confess that that very thing had already happened when she heard her name being called. "Jennsen! Jennsen!" It was Tom. Big as he was, he stood out like a mountain among foothills, yet he was holding up his hand, waving for her, as if he feared she would have trouble spotting him. Sebastian leaned closer. "You know him?" "He helped me get you out." Jennsen had no time to explain any more than that before smiling her acknowledgement to the big man waving his arm at her. Tom, happy as a puppy at seeing her, rushed out to meet her in the middle of the street. She saw his brothers back at their table. Tom wore a wide grin. "I knew you'd come just like you promised.
Joe and Clayton said I was nuts to think you would, but I told them you would keep your promise to stop before you left.
I just came from the palace just now. She patted her cloak where it concealed the knife. I'm afraid that we're in a rush and need to be on our way. Tom nodded knowingly. He seized Sebastian's hand and pumped it as if they were friends long separated.
I'm Tom. You must be the friend Jennsen was helping.
That's right. I'm Sebastian. Tom tilted his head and gestured toward Jennsen.
She's something, isn't she?
I've never seen anyone like her, Sebastian assured him.
A man couldn't want for more than a woman like this on his side,
Tom said. He stepped between them, putting an arm around their shoulders, preventing any escape, and guided them back to his stand.
I've got something for you both.
What do you mean? Jennsen asked. They didn't have time for any delay. They needed to get away before the wizard came out looking for them or sent troops after them. Now that Nathan Rahl had seen her, he could describe her to guards. Everyone would know what they looked like.
Oh, something,
Tom said cryptically. She smiled up at the big blond man. What do you have? Tom reached into his pocket and came up with a purse. He held it out to her.
Well, first off, I got this back for you.
My money? Tom grinned as he watched the astonishment in her eyes as her fingers touched her familiar worn leather purse.
You'll be pleased to know that the gentleman who had it was reluctant to part with it, but since it wasn't his, in the end he saw the light of reason, along with a few stars.
Tom nudged her shoulder, as if to say she could figure out what more he meant by that. Sebastian's gaze followed as she pulled back her cloak and tied the purse around her belt. His expression said that he had no trouble figuring out what had happened to it. But how did you find him? Jennsen asked. Tom shrugged.
The place looks big to those visiting, but when you're here often, you learn who the regulars are and know what their business is. I recognized your description of the cut purse. Early this morning, he breezed by, talking his line, trying to gull a woman out of her money. About the time he passed, I saw his hand below her packages, slipping into her shawl, so I snatched him by the collar. My brothers and I had a long talk with the fellow about returning things he'd found that didn't belong to him.
This place is full of thieves, Jennsen said. Tom shook his head.
Don't judge a place by one man. Don't get me wrong, they're around. But most folks here are honest enough. The way I see it, wherever you go, there will always be thieves. Always has been, always will be. The man I fear most is the one who preaches virtue and a better life while using people's good intentions to shade their eyes from the light of truth.
I guess so, she said. Maybe virtue and a better life is a goal worthy of such means, Sebastian said.
From what I've seen in life, a man who preaches a better way at the cost of the truth is a man who wants nothing more than for himself to be the master and you the slave.
I see what you mean, Sebastian conceded. I guess I'm fortunate not to have had dealings with such people.
Count your blessings, Tom said.
At his table, Jennsen took the hand of both Joe and Clayton. Thank you for helping. I can't believe you got my purse back. Their grins had much in common with Tom's. Most fun we've had in a while, Joe said. Not only that, Clayton added, but we can't thank you enough for keeping Tom busy so we could spend a couple days visiting the palace. About time Tom gave us a break. Tom put a hand against Jennsen's back, urging her around the table to his wagon beyond. Sebastian followed the two of them between the wine barrels and the stand beside them selling leather goods, where before Irma had sold her sausages. Behind Tom's wagon, Jennsen saw his big horses. Then beyond them, she saw the others. Our horses! Jennsen's jaw dropped. You got us our horses?
Sure did, Tom said, beaming with pride. Found Irma this morning when she came to the market with another load of sausages. She had the horses with her. I told her you'd promised to come see me today before you left, so she was able to have a chance to get them back to you. All your supplies are there with them.
That's good luck, Sebastian said. We can't thank you enough. We're in a hurry to get going. Tom gestured to Jennsen's waist where she kept the knife under her cloak.
I figured.
Jennsen looked around, feeling a rising flood of dismay. Where's Betty? Tom frowned.
Betty?
Jennsen swallowed. My goat, Betty. It was a mighty effort to keep her voice steady. Where's Betty?
I'm sorry, Jennsen. I don't know anything about a goat. Irma only had the horses.
Tom's face sagged.
I never thought to ask about anything else.
Do you know where Irma lives? Tom's head hung.
Sorry, no. She showed up this morning, and she had your horses and things. She sold her sausages and waited around for a while before she said she had to get on home.
Jennsen seized his sleeve. How long ago?
Tom shrugged. I don't know, a couple hours ago?
He glanced over his shoulder at his brothers. They both nodded. Jensen's jaw trembled. She feared to test her voice again. She knew that she and Sebastian couldn't hang around waiting. With the wizards so close trying to stop her, she knew they would be lucky to get away with their lives. Returning would be out of the question. A glance to Sebastian's face confirmed it. Tears stung her eyes. But didn't you find out where she lived? Tom's gaze sank as he shook his head. Didn't you ask if she had anything else belonging to us? He shook his head again. Jennsen wanted to scream and pound her fists against his chest. Did you even think to ask when she would be back? Tom shook his head. But we promised her money for watching our horses, Jennsen said. She would say when she would be back so she could be paid. Still looking at his feet, Tom said, She told me she was owed money for watching the horses. I paid her. Sebastian pulled out money, counted out silver coins, and held them out to Tom. Tom refused it, but Sebastian insisted, finally tossing the money on the table to settle the debt. Jennsen choked back her desperation. Betty was gone. Tom looked heartbroken. I'm sorry. Jennsen could only nod. She wiped her nose as she watched Joe and Clayton saddling their horses for them. The sounds of the market seemed distant. In a numb state, she hardly felt the cold. When she saw the horses, she had thought, now she could think only of Betty, bleating in distress, if Betty was even still alive. We can't stay, Sebastian answered softly to the pleading look she gave him. You know that as well as I. We have to be on our way. She looked back to Tom. But I told you before about Betty. Desperation drove into her voice. I told you that Irma had our horses and my goat, Betty. I told you. I know I did. Tom couldn't meet her eyes. You did, ma'am. I'm sorry, but I just forgot to ask her. I can't lie to you and tell you anything else or make an excuse. You told me. I forgot. Jennsen nodded and put a hand on his arm. Thank you for getting our horses and all the other help. I couldn't have done it without you. We have to get going, Sebastian said, checking his saddlebags and securing the flaps. It's going to take time to work our way through the crowds and out of here. We'll give you an escort, Joe said. People get out of the way of our big draft horses, Clayton explained. Come on, we know the quickest way out. Follow us, and we'll get you through the crowds. Both men pulled a horse over so they could step up on a barrel and mount up bareback. They deftly guided the huge horses out of the narrow way between the stands and barrels without so much as jostling anything. Sebastian stood waiting for her, holding the reins to their horses, Rusty and Pete. On her way past, Jennsen paused and gazed up into Tom's eyes, sharing with him a private, wordless moment among all the people around. She stretched up and kissed his cheek, then held her own cheek against his for a moment. His fingertips just touched her shoulder. As she drew away, his wistful gaze stayed on her face. Thank you for helping me, she whispered. I'd have been lost without you. Tom smiled then. My pleasure, ma'am. Jennsen, she said. He nodded.
Jennsen.
He cleared his throat.
Jennsen, I'm sorry.
Jennsen, holding back her tears, touched her fingers to his lips to silence him. You helped me save Sebastian's life. You were a hero for me when I needed one. Thank you from the depths of my heart. He stuffed his hands in his pockets as his gaze sank to the ground once more.
Safe journey to you, Jennsen, wherever you may go in your life. Thank you for letting me join you for a small part of it.
Steel against steel, she said, not even understanding why, but it somehow sounded right. You helped me in that. Tom smiled then, with a look of intense pride and gratitude.
That he may be the magic against magic. Thank you, Jennsen.
She patted Rusty's muscular neck before putting a boot into a stirrup and boosting herself up onto the saddle. She cast the big man a last look over her shoulder. Staying with his things, Tom watched as Jennsen and Sebastian followed Joe and Clayton out into the sea of people. Their two big escorts, yelling and whistling, moved people out of the way, creating a clear path ahead. People stopped and looked when they heard the commotion coming, then stepped aside at the sight of the huge horses. Sebastian, flashing a heated scowl, leaned toward her. What was the big ox babbling about magic? He whispered over at her. I don't know, she said in a low voice. She let out a sigh. But he helped me get you out. She wanted to tell him that Tom might be big, but he was no ox. She didn't, though. For some reason, she didn't want to talk about Tom to Sebastian. Even though Tom had been helping her to rescue Sebastian, what they had done together for some reason felt very private to her. When they finally reached the edge of the marketplace, Joe and Clayton waved them a farewell as Jennsen and Sebastian urged their horses ahead at a gallop, out onto the cold, empty Azrith plains. Chapter 30. Jennsen and Sebastian rode north and west across the Azrith plains, not far from where only that morning she had ridden back with Tom in his wagon from the swamp around Althea's place. Her visit to Althea only the day before, along with the treacherous journey through the swamp, seemed remote to her now. She had spent most of the day getting up into the palace, talking her way past guards and officials, getting Sebastian released, bluffing the moored Sith Nida into helping them, and getting down and out of the plateau with Wizard Rahl at their heels. With so much of the day already gone, they weren't able to travel a great distance before darkness descended and they had to make camp out in the open plain. With those cutthroats not all that far away, we don't dare make a fire, Sebastian said when he saw her shivering. They could spot us from miles away, and if we're night-blinded by a fire, we would never know they were sneaking up on us. Overhead, the moonless sky was a vast, glittering mantle of stars. Jennsen thought about what Althea said, that a bird could be seen on a moonless night by noting the stars it blocked out as it passed overhead. She said that was how she could see one who was a hole in the world. Jennsen saw no bird, just 3 coyotes in the distance, trotting along on a night patrol of their territory. In the flat, empty land, they were easy enough to spot by starlight alone as they went on their hunt for small nocturnal animals. With numb fingers, Jennsen untied her bedroll from the back of the saddle and pulled it down. "And where would you propose we get the wood to make a fire, anyway?" Sebastian turned and stared at her. A smile stole onto his face. "I never thought of that. I guess we couldn't have a fire even if we wanted one." She scrutinized the empty plain as she dragged the saddle off of Rusty's back and laid it on the ground near Sebastian. Even with only the cold starlight, she could make out things well enough. "If anyone approached, we could see them coming. Do you think one of us should keep watch through the night?" "No, without a campfire and not moving, they'd never find us out in this great dark expanse. I think it would be better to get some sleep, so we can make good time tomorrow." With the horses picketed, she used her saddle for a seat. As she unfurled her bedroll, Jennsen found 2 white cloth bundles inside. She knew she hadn't put any such things in her bedroll. She undid the knot at the top of one bundle and discovered a meat pie inside. She saw then Sebastian making the same discovery. "Looks like the Creator has provided for us," he said. Jennsen smiled as she stared down at the meat pie in her lap. "Tom left these." Sebastian didn't ask how she knew. "The Creator has provided for us through Tom. Brother Narav says that even when we think someone has provided for us, it is actually the Creator working through them. We in the old world believe that when we give to someone in need, we are really doing the Creator's good works. That's why the welfare of others is our sacred duty." Jennsen said nothing, fearing that if she did, he might think she was criticizing Brother Narav, or even the Creator. She couldn't dispute the word of a great man like Brother Narav. She had never done any good works like Brother Narav had. She had never even left anyone meat pies or done anything else helpful. It seemed to her that she brought only trouble and suffering to people. Her mother, Lethia, Althea, Friedrich, and who knew how many others. If any force worked through her, it certainly wasn't the Creator. Sebastian, perhaps seeing something of her thoughts in her expression, spoke softly. "That's why I'm helping you. I believe it's what the Creator would want me to do. That's how I know Brother Narav and Emperor Jagang would approve of me helping you. This is the very thing we're fighting for, to have people care about others by sharing their burdens." She smiled not just her appreciation, but also at the notion of such noble intentions. Noble intentions, though, which, for reasons she didn't even fully understand, felt to her like a knife in the back. Jennsen looked up from the meat pie in her lap. "So that's why you're helping me, then?" Her smile was forced. "Because it's your duty." Sebastian looked almost as if he'd been slapped. "No." He came closer, going down on one knee. "No,
In the beginning, of course, but it's not just duty.
You make it sound like I'm a leper. You think you have to...
No, that's not it at all. As he searched for words, that radiant smile of his came to his face, that smile that made her heart ache. I've never met anyone like you, Jennsen. I swear I've never laid my eyes on a woman as beautiful as you, or as smart. You make me feel like I'm a nobody. But then when you smile at me, I feel like I'm someone important. I've never met anyone who made me feel this way. At first, it was duty, but now, I swear...
Jennsen sat in shock at hearing him say such things, at hearing the tender sincerity, the earnest pleading in his voice. I never knew.
I should never have kissed you. I know it was wrong. I'm a soldier in the army against oppression. My life is devoted to the cause of helping my people, all people. I don't have anything to offer a woman like you.
She couldn't imagine why he would think he had to offer her something. He had saved her life. Then why did you kiss me? He gazed into her eyes, looking as if he had to pull words up from some great painful depth. I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry. I tried not to. I knew it was wrong, but when we were that close and I was looking into your beautiful eyes and your arms were holding me and I was holding you, I'd never wanted anything so much in my life. I just couldn't help myself. I had to. I'm sorry. Jensen's gaze fell away. She stared down at the meat pie. Sebastian pulled the familiar mask of composure around himself and sat back down on his saddle. Don't feel sorry, she whispered without looking up. I liked the kiss. He sat forward expectantly. You did? Jennsen nodded. I'm glad to hear that it wasn't done out of duty. That made him smile and eased the tension. No duty ever felt that good, he said. Together they laughed, something she couldn't even remember doing. It felt good to laugh. As Jennsen devoured one of the meat pies, relishing the flavorful spices and savory chunks of meat, she felt good again. She hoped she hadn't been too hard on Tom for forgetting about Betty. She had let her frustrations, fear, and anger come out at him. He was a good man. He had helped her when she needed it most. Her thoughts lingered on Tom, on how good she had felt when she was around him. He made her feel important, feel confident in herself, whereas Sebastian often made her feel humble. Tom had a handsome smile, a different kind of handsome than Sebastian's smile. Tom had a hearty smile. Sebastian had an inscrutable smile. Tom's smile made her feel secure and strong. Sebastian's smile made her feel defenseless and weak. After she had eaten every crumb of the meat pie, Jennsen wrapped herself in blankets over the top of her cloak. Still shivering, she remembered how Betty had kept them warm at night. In the silence, her sense of gloom returned to haunt her, refusing to allow her to fall asleep, despite her exhaustion from everything she had been through the last couple of days. She didn't look forward to the forlorn prospect of what the future might hold for her. She could foresee only an endless hunt until Lord Rahl's men finally caught her. She felt empty without her mother, without Betty. She realized that she didn't have any idea where she would go now, other than to keep running. She had been intent on Althea's help, but even that had proved to be an empty dream. In some distant corner of her mind, Jennsen had held out a spark of irrational hope that going to her childhood home of the People's Palace might somehow hold a favorable resolution. She shivered not only with the cold, but with the bleak prospect of what the future held. Sebastian inched his back up close to her, protecting her from the wind. The idea of it being more than duty to him was a comfort. She thought about what it felt like to have his body pressed against the length of her. She thought about the intoxicating feel of his mouth against hers. His words that had so surprised her, "I've never laid my eyes on a woman as beautiful as you," still echoed around in her head. She wasn't sure that she believed him. Maybe she was afraid to believe him. The first day she had met him, he made several complimentary remarks. The first about how people might say the dead soldier saw a beautiful young woman strutting along and thus tripped and fell to his death, and then Sebastian's rule, as he called it, giving her the dead soldier's ornate knife, saying beauty belonged with beauty. She had never trusted words offered so effortlessly. She thought again about the sincerity in his eyes this time, and how surprisingly tongue-tied and awkward he'd seemed.
Insincerity was often smoothly delivered, but matters of the heart were more difficult to express because so much was at stake. It surprised her to hear that her smile made him feel important. She hadn't suspected that he might feel the same kinds of emotions she felt. She hadn't suspected how good it would feel to have a man like Sebastian, a man of the world, an important man, think she was beautiful. Jennsen always felt graceless and plain compared with her mother. She liked knowing that someone thought she was beautiful. She wondered what it would be like if he rolled over right there and embraced her again, kissed her again, this time with no one around. She could feel her heart pounding at the very prospect. "I'm sorry about your goat," he whispered in the silence, his back still to her.
"I know."
But with Wizard Rahl after us and still this close, the goat would only slow us down. As much as she loved Betty, Jennsen knew she had to put other things first. Still, she would give almost anything to hear that singular bleat of Betty's voice, or see her little upright tail wagging in a blur as her whole body wiggled with the excitement of Jennsen's greeting. Jennsen could feel the lumps of carrots under her head in the pack she was using as a pillow. She knew they couldn't stay and search for Betty, but that didn't make it any easier to know they were leaving her for good. It broke her heart. Jennsen looked back over her shoulder in the darkness. "Did they hurt you? I was so worried that they would hurt you." "That Mord Sith would have. You came just in time." "What did it feel like when she touched you with the Aegil?" Sebastian thought a moment. "Like being hit by lightning, I suppose." Jennsen laid her head back down on the pack. She wondered why she had felt nothing from the power of the Mord Sith's weapon. He had to be wondering that same thing, but if he was, he didn't ask. She would have had no answer for him anyway. Nida had been astonished too, and said that her Aegil worked on everyone. Nida was wrong. For some reason, Jennsen found that strangely worrisome. Chapter 31. Stiff and sore from the cold night on the ground, Jennsen woke just as the sky was beginning to take on a faint pink glow. The western sky still displayed a sweep of stars. She hadn't slept much, and wished she could sleep more, but they could not afford to linger. It could be fatal to be caught out in the open like they were, where they could be spotted from miles away. Stretching her arms over her head, the first thing Jennsen laid her eyes upon was the black shape of the plateau against the faint blush of the eastern sky. As she watched, the People's Palace atop it took on a glow around the edges as the first golden rays of the morning sun, still beyond the horizon, touched it from behind. Standing there, looking at the palace, Jennsen felt a peculiar longing. This was her homeland. She wanted so much to have some sense of her place in the world, but her homeland harbored only terror and death for her. Fearing how near they yet were to the palace and Wizard Rahl, they quickly gathered their belongings and saddled the horses. Climbing up onto a frigid saddle was a miserable experience. Jennsen spread a blanket across her lap so that Rusty's heat would help warm her. She patted and rubbed her horse's neck, both out of affection and to warm her fingers. Rusty's body heat would keep her second meat pie, wrapped in her bedroll tied to the back of the saddle, from freezing. They rode hard, walking at times to give the horses a rest, but their effort rewarded them when, later in the day, the country began to bear evidence that they were reaching the edges of the Azrith Plains. Their goal was to escape into the wall of mountains rimming the western horizon. Their clear view back across the plains revealed no pursuers, so far anyway. By late in the afternoon, they rode into an area of low hills, ravines, scraggly vegetation, and stunted trees. It was as if the unbroken hardpan of the Azrith Plains could no longer keep itself flat and out of boredom, had to finally roll and heave into a featured terrain. The hungry horses tore at the shrubs and thick clumps of dry grasses on the way past. Even though the horses had bits in their mouths, Jennsen didn't have the heart to deny them a bite to eat. She was hungry, too. The meat pies had provided them a good breakfast, but they were long ago finished off. Before dark, they reached foothills leading up into more rugged country, where they made camp in the lee of a rock outcropping. At the base of a cut of rock, Jennsen found a place that would provide them shelter from the wind, and for the horses, at last enough grasses to graze on. As soon as the horses were unsaddled, they eagerly began browsing on the clumps of tough stalks. Jennsen pulled out some of their gear and supplies while Sebastian hunted around, coming up with remnants of some of the stunted little trees, long dead and dried to a silver gray. He used his battle axe to cut down the dry wood and built a small fire up close to the cut of rock where it wouldn't easily be seen. While she waited for the fire to get hot, he gently laid a blanket around her shoulders. Sitting before the fire, with Sebastian close at her side, Jennsen worked salt pork onto sticks and rested them across rocks so the pork could cook over the fire. "Was it hard to get to Althea's place?" he asked at last. She realized that, being preoccupied with everything that had happened, she hadn't told him much at all about what had taken place while he was being held prisoner. "I had to go through a swamp, but I made it." She didn't really want to complain about her difficulties, her fears, her battle with the snake, or nearly drowning. That was past. She had survived. Sebastian had all the while been sitting in a prison, knowing that at any moment they might put him to death or torture him. Althea was forever a prisoner in the swamp. Others had it worse than she. "The swamp sounds wonderful. It had to be better than this wretched cold. I've never seen anything like it in all my life." "You mean it isn't cold where you come from? In the old world?" "No. Winters have cold spells, nothing like this, of course. And sometimes it's rainy, too. But we never have that dreadful snow. And it's not like this miserable cold of the New World. I don't know why anyone would want to live here." She was startled at the idea of a winter without snow and cold. She had trouble even imagining it. "Where else could we live? We have no choice." "I guess," he admitted with a sigh. "Winter is wearing on. Spring will arrive before you know it. You'll see." "I hope so. I'd even rather be in that place you mentioned before, the Keeper's Furnace, than in this frozen wasteland." Jennsen frowned. "The place I mentioned? I never mentioned any place called the Keeper's Furnace." "Sure you did." Sebastian used his sword to move the logs together so that the flames could build. Sparks swirled up into the darkness. "Back at the palace, just before we kissed." Jennsen held her hands out, warming her fingers before the glorious heat. "I don't remember." "You said Althea had been there." "Where?" "The Pillars of Creation." Jennsen drew her hands back inside her cloak and stared over at him. "No, I never said that. She was talking about something else. Not anywhere she'd been." "What was she talking about, then?" Jennsen dismissed his question with an impatient wave of her hand. "It was just idle talk. It's not important." She pulled a ringlet of red hair away from her face. "The Pillars of Creation is a place?" He nodded as he banked the white hot coals together with his sword. "Like I said, the Keeper's Furnace." Frustrated, she folded her arms. "What does that mean?" He looked up, puzzled by her tone. "You know, hot. Like when someone says, 'It's as hot today as the Keeper's Furnace.' That's why people will occasionally refer to the place as the Keeper's Furnace. But its name is the Pillars of Creation." "And you've been there?" "Are you kidding? I don't even know of anyone who has gone there. People fear the place. Some think it really is the Keeper's province, and that only death exists there." "Where is it?" He gestured south with his sword. "In a desolate place down in the old world. You know how it is. People are often superstitious about remote places." Jennsen stared back into the flames, trying to reconcile it all in her head. There was something about it that wasn't exactly right. Something about it that alarmed her. "Why is it called that? The Pillars of Creation?" Sebastian shrugged, frowning again at her tone. "Like I said, it's a deserted place, hot as the Keeper's Furnace, so that's why some people call it that. The heat of the place. As for the actual name, the place is said to be..." "If no one goes there, then how does anyone know all this?" "Over time, there have been some people who had gone there, or rather gone near there, and they've told others about it. Word spreads, knowledge is accumulated. It's in a place kind of like the plains here." "The Azrith Plains?" "Yes, deserted like the Azrith Plains, but much bigger. And it's always hot there. Dry and deathly hot. There are a few trade routes that cross the barren fringes. Without proper clothing to protect you from the broiling sun and blistering winds, you would bake alive in no time. Without enough water, you won't last long." "And this place is called the Pillars of Creation?" "No, that's just the land you must go through first. Near the center of this vast empty land, there is said to be a low place, a broad valley, that's even hotter yet. Deadly hot, hot as the Keeper's Furnace. That's the Pillars of Creation." "But why is it called the Pillars of Creation?" Sebastian mounded sand with his boot to contain the red-hot coals that dropped from the logs down into the wavering heat. It's said that down the cliffs, down the surrounding rugged rock walls and slopes, down in that vast valley, there are towering rock columns. It's for those soaring rock formations that the place is named. Jennsen turned the sticks with the salt pork. That would make sense. Rock pillars. I've seen towers something like that before in other places where rock is stacked up like disorderly columns of coins on a table. These are said to be more extraordinary than any others, as if the world itself were reaching up in homage toward the Creator, so some consider it a sacred place. But it's a place of deadly heat, too, so while it is thought of by some as the Creator's forge, it's also associated with the Keeper, so some call it the Keeper's furnace. In addition to the heat, everyone has reason enough to fear going there. It remains for everyone a place of otherworldly conflict best left alone. Creation and destruction, life and death, together? The firelight danced in his eyes as he looked over at her. That's what people say. You mean some think this is a place where death itself is trying to consume the world of life? Death is always stalking the living. Brother Narav teaches that man's own evil is what brings the Keeper's shadow to darken the world. If we give in to evil ways, that gives evil power in the world of life. Then the Keeper will be able to topple the very pillars of creation, and the world will end. The words chilled Jennsen to the bone, as if the hand of death itself had touched her. It would be just like a sorceress to practice sly wiles with words. Jennsen's mother had warned her that sorceresses never told what they knew, but often held back important things. What had been Althea's true intent when she had so casually named Jennsen one of the pillars of creation? Although Jennsen didn't understand it, it now seemed all too clear that Althea might have had some hidden motive for planting the seed of that name in Jennsen's mind. So, what happened with Althea? Why couldn't she help you? Jennsen was startled out of her thoughts by his voice. She turned the sticks with the salt pork, seeing that it still needed more cooking, as she considered how to answer the question simply. She told me that she tried to help me once when I was little. Darken Rahl found out and crippled her for it. He twisted her gift, too, so she can't use her own magic. Now she couldn't cast me a spell even if she had wanted to. Maybe, without even knowing it, Darken Rahl was doing the Creator's work. Jennsen frowned in astonishment. What do you mean? The Imperial Order wants to eliminate magic from the world. Brother Narav says it's the Creator's work we do because magic is evil. And what do you think? Do you really think the gift of the Creator could be evil? How is magic used? His hooded gaze fixed on her, anger clearly evident in his eyes. Is it used to help people? Help the Creator's children in this life? No. It's used for selfish reasons. You have only to look at the House of Rahl. They've used the gift for thousands of years to rule Dahara, and what has that rule been? Has it been to the help or benefit of the people, or has it been one of torture and death? The last of it was not a question, but a statement, and one Jennsen could not argue. Maybe, Sebastian added, the Creator was working through Darken Rahl to lift the taint of magic from Althea, to mercifully free her from it. Jennsen rested her chin on her knees as she watched the meat sizzling. Althea said that she was left with only the gift of prophecy, complaining that it was torturous to her. Jennsen's mother had taught her to draw a grace and told her that the gift was given by the Creator. In the proper hands, a grace was magic. Even though Jennsen had no magic, that magical symbol had on several occasions protected her. While she knew that people could do evil, Jennsen didn't like the idea of thinking that the gift was evil. Even though she couldn't do magic, she knew that it could be a wondrous thing. She gently sought to try a different approach. You said that Emperor Jagang has sorceresses with him, the Sisters of the Light, who might be able to help me. They use magic. If magic is evil, they use magic in our cause, so that magic might one day be eliminated from the world. How can that make sense? If you truly believe magic to be evil, then how could you think to ally yourselves with what you profess to be evil? Sebastian checked the salt pork when she held one of the sticks out to him, then pulled a piece off on the point of his knife. He held up the knife and waggled it for her to see. People kill other people with knives and swords. If we wanted to eliminate knives and swords so that the killing would stop, we could hardly do so with words alone. We would have to take away people's knives and swords by force in order to stop the madness of violence for the good of everyone. People cling to evil. We would have to use knives and swords in that fight to rid the world of those evil things. Then the world would be at peace. Without the means of murder, people's passions would cool, and the keeper would flee their hearts. Jennsen carved off a chunk of sizzling meat and blew on it to cool it a little. And so you use magic in that way? That's right, Sebastian chewed, giving a moan of approval to the taste before he swallowed and went on. We want to eliminate the evil of magic, but to do so we have to use magic in the fight, or else evil would win. Jennsen took a juicy bite of the pork, moaning her agreement with his opinion of the taste. It was wonderful having something hot to eat. And do Brother Narev and the Emperor Jagang think that knives and swords are evil too? Of course, because their sole purpose is to maim and kill. Naturally, we don't mean tools like bread knives, but weapons certainly are evil things. People will eventually be free of their scourge, though, and then the plague of murder and death will be a thing of the past. You mean to say that even soldiers won't have weapons? No, soldiers will always have to be armed in order to defend a free and peaceful people. But then how can people protect themselves? From what? Only the soldiers will carry deadly weapons. Jennsen tilted her head toward him in admonition. Were it not for the knife I carry, soldiers would have easily murdered me along with my mother. Evil soldiers. Our soldiers fight only for good, for the defense and security of the people, not to enslave them. When we defeat the Daharan forces, then there will be peace. But even then, he leaned toward her. Don't you see? Eventually, with magic eliminated, weapons will no longer be needed. It's the corrupt passions of people which are made lethal because they have access to weapons that result in crimes and murders. Soldiers have passions? He dismissed the thought with a wave of a hand. Not if they're trained properly and are under supervision of good officers. Jennsen gazed off at the sparkling dome of stars. The world he envisioned certainly sounded inviting. But if what he claimed were true, then magic, as they used it, was being used for a good end. So that would mean it could be neither good nor bad, but that, much like her knife, the intent of the person wielding magic actually carried the moral condition, not the magic itself. Rather than say so, she asked another question. What would a world without magic be like? Sebastian smiled wistfully. Everyone would be equal. No one would have an unfair advantage. He stabbed another piece of meat and pulled it off the stick on the point of his knife. Everyone would work together then, because we would all be the same. No one would have the unfair use of magic and be able to take advantage of others. You, for example, would be free to live your life without Lord Rahl hunting you with his magic. Althea said that Richard Rahl had been born with powers of the gift not seen in thousands of years. He had, after all, gotten closer to her than Darken Rahl ever had. He had sent those men who had murdered her mother, but Althea had also said that Jennsen was a hole in the world to those with the gift. Lord Rahl could hunt her, but not with magic. You will never be free, Sebastian finally added in a quiet voice, until you eliminate Richard Rahl. Her eyes turned toward him. Why me? With all those fighting against him, why do you say until I eliminate him? But even as she was asking the question, she began to see the terrible answer. Well, he said, leaning back, I guess what I really meant to say was that you won't be free until Lord Rahl is eliminated. He turned away and pulled a water skin closer. She watched him take a long drink, then changed the subject. Captain Lerner said that Lord Rahl was married. To a confessor, Sebastian confirmed. If Richard Rahl was looking to find a wife who was his match in evil, he found her. You know about her, then? Only the little I've heard from the Emperor. I can tell you what I know if you want. Jennsen nodded. With a finger and thumb, she pulled some more salt pork off one of the long sticks, eating while she watched the firelight dance in his eyes as he spoke. The barrier between the old world to the south and the new world to the north stood for thousands of years, until Lord Rahl destroyed it, so that he might conquer our people. Probably not long before your mother would have been born, I think, the new world was itself divided up into 3 lands. To the far west was Westland. Dahara is to the east. After killing his father and seizing rule, Richard Rahl destroyed these boundaries separating the three lands of the New World. Between Westland and Dahara is the Midlands, an evil place where magic is said to hold sway and where the confessors live. The Midlands is ruled by the Mother Confessor herself. Emperor Jagang told me that while she is young, maybe my age, she is as smart as she is deadly. Jennsen was given pause by his chilling words. Do you know what a confessor is? What confessor means? Holding the water skin, Sebastian draped a forearm over his bent knee. I don't know, except that she's gifted with frightening power. Her mere touch burns away a man's mind, making him into her mindless slave. Jennsen listened, rapt, appalled by such a notion. And they really do anything she says? Simply because she touched them? Sebastian handed her the water skin. Touched them with her evil magic. Emperor Jagang told me that her magic is so powerful that if she tells a man so enslaved that she wants him to die on the spot, he will do so. You mean he would kill himself right before her eyes? No, I mean he would simply drop dead because she commanded it. His heart would stop or something. He would just drop dead. Shaken by the very idea, Jennsen set the water skin aside. She drew her blanket up around herself. She was exhausted, and she was weary of learning new things about Lord Rahl. Every time she learned something new, it was more terrible than the last thing. Her monster half-brother, after he had killed their father, seemed to have wasted no time in assuming the family duty of hunting her. After they'd eaten and seen to the horses, Jennsen curled up under a blanket and her cloak. She wished she could go to sleep and wake to find it had all been a bad dream. She almost wished she would never wake to have to face the future. Because they had a fire, Sebastian didn't sleep with his back to hers. She missed the comfort of that. With anguishing thoughts cascading through her mind, she stared into the flames, eyes wide open, as Sebastian fell asleep. Jennsen wondered what she could do now. Her mother was dead, so she had no real home. Home had been with her mother, wherever they were. She wondered if her mother was watching her from the world of the dead, along with all the other good spirits. She hoped her mother was at peace and had happiness at last. Jennsen felt an empty, desolate sorrow for Althea. There could be no help from the sorceress, and none wanted. Jennsen felt shame at the trouble she had brought to others who tried to help her. Her mother had died for the crime of giving birth to Jennsen. Althea's sister, Lethea, had been murdered by Jennsen's relentless hunters. Poor Althea was stuck forever in that awful swamp for the crime of trying to protect Jennsen when she had been but a child. Friedrich was almost as much a prisoner as Althea, his life robbed of many joys. Jennsen remembered the thrill of Sebastian's kiss. Althea and Friedrich had lost the pleasure of sharing passion. It was as if there had been that kiss for Jennsen, the awakening discovery, the spark of possibility, and then there could be no more, ever. She was in her own kind of swamp, also a prison of Lord Rahl's making, trapped in the endless flight from killers. She thought about what Sebastian had said, that she would never be free until she eliminated Richard Rahl. Jennsen watched Sebastian as he slept. He had come unexpectedly into her life. He had saved her life. She could never have imagined the first time she saw him, or the first night when she looked up into his eyes from across the fire after she had drawn the grace at the cave entrance, that he would one day end up kissing her. His spikes of white hair had a soft golden glow from the firelight. His face was such a pleasure for her. What more was there for them? She didn't know the answer to that. She didn't know what that kiss had meant, or where it could lead them, if anywhere. She wasn't sure she wanted it to. She wasn't sure he did. She feared he didn't. Chapter 32. The more open ground closer to the plains was soon behind them, and they began a difficult journey through deepening snow and rugged terrain, taking them slowly but inexorably up into mountainous country. Sebastian had agreed to take her where she wanted to go, to the old world. There she hoped to be safe, to be free for the first time in her life. Without Sebastian, such a dream would not even have been possible. He told her that the rugged range of mountains they were entering, along with their vast tracts of forests, skirted the western edge of Dahara, safely out of the way of most people, and would eventually lead them down toward the old world. As they entered the sheltering solitude among the shadows of the towering peaks, they finally began to work their way more to the south, following the mountains toward a distant liberty. The weather was brutal in the mountains. For several days they had to walk, lest they kill the poor horses. Rusty and Pete were hungry, and the heavy snow cover made it difficult for them to get at any vegetation. Their thick winter coats were getting mangy. At least they were still sound, if weak. The same could be said for her and Sebastian. As the heavy overcast darkened ominously and a light snow began to fall late one afternoon, they were fortunate to find a small village. They spent the night there, letting the horses stay in the small stable where they had good oats and clean bedding. There was no inn in the town. Sebastian and Jennsen paid a few copper pennies to sleep in the hayloft. After having been out in the open so long, Jennsen felt it was a palace.
Page 301. The morning brought a storm with wind and snow, but even worse, the snow was interspersed with a heavy, wet sleet that came in gales. Traveling in such conditions would be not only miserable, but dangerous. She was glad, especially for the horses, that it kept them at the stable an extra day and another night. The horses ate and rested, while Sebastian and Jennsen told each other light-hearted stories from their youth. She loved to see the gleam in his eyes when he told her some of his misadventures of fishing as a boy. The next day dawned blue, but with the wind. Still, they dared not linger longer. They made their way along roads or trails, since people were few and far between. Sebastian was ever cautious, but quietly confident that they would be safe enough. With the ever-present comfort of the knife at her belt, Jennsen, too, felt that it was better to risk the roads and trails rather than attempt to strike out across remote and unknown territory covered in a thick blanket of snow. Traveling cross-country was always difficult, from time to time dangerous, and with the barrier of towering mountains all about, frequently impossible. Winter only made such travel all the more difficult, but worse, hid perils lurking beneath the snow. They feared to have a horse break a leg attempting it needlessly. That night, as she started building them a shelter by loosely weaving together a dozen saplings and covering them with balsam boughs, Sebastian stumbled back to their camp, panting from effort. His hands were slick with blood. "Soldier," he said, trying to catch his breath. Jennsen knew what soldiers he meant. "But how could they have followed us? How could they?" Sebastian looked away from her fury, her frantic demand. "It's Lord Rahl's gifted chasing us." He pulled a deep breath. "Wizard Nathan Rahl saw you back at the palace." That made no sense. She was a hole in the world to the gifted. How could any gifted follow a hole in the world? He saw her dubious expression. "Not too hard to track through snow." Snow, of course. She nodded in resignation, her fury turning to fear. "One of the quad?" "I'm not sure. It was a Daharan soldier. He came out of nowhere at me. I had to fight for my life. I killed him, but we must hurry and get out of here in case there were others nearby." She was too frightened to argue. They had to keep moving. The thought of men coming out of the darkness at them lent swiftness to her actions as they saddled the horses. They were quickly mounted and soon riding hard while there was still enough light to see by. They had to dismount then and walk to let the horses rest. Sebastian was sure they would have put distance on anyone after them. The snow helped them see, so that even with clouds scudding past a partial moon, they were able to follow the road. By the next night, they were so exhausted that they had to stop, even at the risk of being captured. They slept sitting up, leaning together before a small fire, with their backs to a deadfall. They made slow but steady progress in the days following, and saw no sign of anyone following them. Jennsen took little comfort in that. She knew that they would not give up. A stretch of sunny days allowed them to make good time. It was no comfort to her because they left clear tracks, and the soldiers pursuing them would be able to make equally good time. They stayed to roads that had been traveled, whenever they came across them, so as to throw off and delay anyone who followed. But then the storms returned. They pushed onward for 5 days despite near blizzard conditions. As long as they could see the paths and narrow roads and were able to put one foot in front of the other, they couldn't afford to stop, because the wind and snow covered their tracks almost as soon as they made them. Jennsen had spent enough of her life outdoors to know that tracking them would be impossible in such conditions. It was their first real hope of slipping the noose from their necks. They selected roads or trails randomly. Each time they came to a crossroads or fork, Jennsen was relieved to see it because it meant another chance for their pursuers to choose wrong. Several times they cut cross-country, the drifting snow making it impossible for anyone to know where they had gone. Despite how weary she was, Jennsen began to breathe easier. It was exhausting traveling in such conditions, and it seemed like the foul weather would never relent, but then it did. Late in the afternoon, as the wind finally died, allowing the quiet of winter to settle back in, they came across a woman struggling along one of the roads. As they rode up behind her, Jennsen saw that the woman was carrying something heavy. Even though the weather had begun to break, fat snowflakes still drifted in the air. Sun shone through an orange slash in the clouds, lending the gray day a peculiar gilding. The woman heard them coming and stepped aside. As they reached her, she held one arm up. "Help me, please." It looked to Jennsen like the woman was carrying a small child all bundled up in blankets. By the look on Sebastian's face, Jennsen feared that he intended to pass on by. He would say that they couldn't stop when they had killers, and maybe even Wizard Rahl at their heels. Jennsen felt confident that for the time being, at least, they had succeeded in slipping away from their hunters. When Sebastian cast her a sidelong glance, she spoke softly before he had a chance to say anything. "Looks like the Creator has provided for this needy woman by sending us to help her." Whether Sebastian was convinced by her words or dared not challenge the Creator's intentions, Jennsen didn't know, but he drew his horse around to a halt. As he dismounted and took the reins to both horses, Jennsen slid down off Rusty. She struggled through heavy, knee-deep snow to reach the woman. She held out her bundle, apparently hoping it would explain everything. She looked as if she were ready to accept help from the keeper himself. Jennsen drew back the flap of bleached wool blanket and saw a boy, maybe 3 or 4, with a blotchy red face. He was still. His eyes were closed. He was burning up with fever. Jennsen lifted the burden from the woman's arms. The woman, about Jensen's age, looked exhausted. She hovered close, worry creasing her face. "I don't know what's taken him," the woman said, on the verge of tears. "He just came down sick." "Why are you out here in the weather?" Sebastian asked. "My husband went off hunting 2 days ago. I don't expect him back for several days more. I couldn't just wait there with no help." "But what are you doing out here?" Jennsen asked. "Where are you going?" "To the Rog Moss." "The what?" Sebastian asked at Jensen's back. "Healers," Jennsen whispered to him. The woman's fingers traced their way along her boy's cheek. Her eyes rarely left his little face, but she finally looked up. "Can you help me get him there? I fear he's getting worse." "I don't know if we—" "How far are they?" Jennsen asked, cutting Sebastian off. The woman pointed down the road. "That way, the way you're going, not far." "How far?" Sebastian asked. The woman for the first time began to weep. "I don't know. I had hoped to make it by tonight, but it will be dark before long. I fear it's farther than I can manage. Please help me." Jennsen rocked the sleeping boy in her arms as she smiled at the woman. "Of course we'll help you." The woman's fingers clutched Jensen's arm. "I'm sorry to trouble you." "Hush now. A ride is no trouble." "We can't leave you out here with a sick child," Sebastian agreed. "We'll take you to the healers." "Let me get up on my horse, and then hand your boy up to me," Jennsen said, as she returned the child to his mother's arms. Once mounted, Jennsen stretched her arms down. The woman hesitated, fearing to part with her child, but then quickly handed him up. Jennsen settled the sleeping boy in her lap, making sure he was well balanced and secure as Sebastian clasped arms with the woman and helped lift her up behind him. As they started out, the woman held Sebastian tight around the waist, but her eyes were on Jennsen and the boy. Jennsen took the lead to give the woman the assurance of being able to see the stranger who now held her baby and her hopes. She urged Rusty ahead through the deep snow, worried that the child was not really sleeping, but unconscious with fever. The wind billowed snow around them as they raced along the road in the fading light. Concern for the boy, wanting to get him to help, made the road seem endless. Each rise revealed only more forest ahead, each curve in the road yet another sweep of empty woods. Jennsen was concerned, too, that their horses couldn't be pushed so hard through deep snow without a rest, or they would drop. Sooner or later, despite the fading light, they would have to slow to give the struggling horses a rest. Jennsen looked back over her shoulder when Sebastian whistled. "That way," the woman called, gesturing toward a cutoff to a smaller trail. Jennsen urged Rusty to the right up the trail. It rose abruptly, switching back and forth to ascend the sharp rise. The trees on the mountainside were huge, with trunks as big around as her horse, rising to a great height before branches spread overhead to close off the leaden sky. The snow was unbroken by anyone before them, but the lay of the trail, the dish in the surface of the snow, the undulating but smooth line it took up through the forest, among rocks and snow-crusted brush, and the way it followed beneath steep overhangs of rock wall and along ledges, made it easy enough to follow. Jennsen checked the boy asleep at her lap and found him the same. She watched the forest around them for any sign of people, but saw none. After being at the palace, in Althea's swamp, and out on the Azrith plains, it was comforting to again be in the forest. Sebastian didn't especially like the woods. He didn't like the snow either, but she found it peaceful the way the snow lent the woods a sacred silence. The smell of wood smoke hanging in the air told her that they were close. A look over her shoulder at the mother's face told her the same. Breaking over the top of a ridge revealed several small wooden buildings along a gently rising wooded slope. In a clearing behind was a small barn with a fenced paddock. A horse at the fence rail, its ears alert, watched them approaching. The horse lifted its head, tossing a whinny their way. Rusty and Pete both snorted a brief greeting in return. Jennsen put 2 fingers between her teeth and whistled as Rusty plowed through the drifts toward the small cabin at the upper end, the only one with smoke rising from the chimney. The door opened as she reached the building. A man threw on a flaxen cloak on his way out to greet them. He wasn't old. He could be the right age. He pulled up the cloak's broad hood against the cold before she could get a good look at his face. "We have a sick boy," Jennsen said, as the man took hold of Rusty's reins. "Are you one of the healers known as the Rog Moss?" The man nodded. "Bring him inside." The mother had already slid down off Sebastian's horse and was standing beside Jennsen to receive her boy into her waiting arms. "Thank the Creator you're here today." The healer, laying a reassuring hand on the woman's back, urging her toward the door, tilted his head in gesture to Sebastian. "You're welcome to put your horses in the back with mine and then come inside." Sebastian thanked him and led the horses away while Jennsen followed the other 2 toward the door. In the failing light, she still hadn't been able to get a good look at the man's face. It was too much to hope she knew, but at the very least, this man was a Rog Moss and could answer her question. Chapter 33. Inside the cabin, a large hearth made of rounded rocks took up most of the wall to the right. Crude burlap curtains hung to the sides of the 2 doorways to rear rooms. A rough-hewn mantel held a lamp, as did the plank tabletop, neither lamp lit. Oak logs crackled and popped in the hearth, lending the room a smoky but inviting aroma, as well as the soft flicker of firelight. An iron arm, black with soot, held a lidded kettle off to the side of the fire. After so long out in the weather, Jennsen felt it was almost too hot inside. The healer laid the boy on one of several pallets along the wall opposite the hearth. The mother knelt on one knee, watching as he drew back the folds of the blanket. Jennsen left them to examine the child as she casually checked the place, making sure there were no surprises lurking. There hadn't been any chimney smoke coming from the other cabins, and she hadn't seen any tracks through the fresh snow, but that didn't mean there couldn't be people in those other cabins. Jennsen moved across the room, past the trestle table in the center, to warm her hands at the hearth. It gave her the chance to cast a glance into the 2 rooms at the rear. Each was tiny, with a sleeping pallet and a few items of clothing hanging on pegs. There was no one else in the place. Between the doorways stood simple pine cabinets. As Jennsen held her hands up before the heat of the fire, and the boy's mother sang him soft songs, the healer hurried to the cabinet and pulled out a number of clay jars. "Bring a flame for the lamp, please," he asked as he set his armload of items on the table. Jennsen pried a long splinter from one of the logs stacked to the side, then held it in the wavering flames until it caught. While she lit the lamp and then replaced the tall glass chimney, he took pinches of fine powders from several of the jars and added them to a white cup. "How is the boy?" she asked in a whisper. He glanced around the room. "Not good." "What can I do to help?" Jennsen asked, after she had adjusted the wick. He wiggled the stopper from a jar. "Well, if you wouldn't mind, bring over the mortar and pestle from the center cupboard." Jennsen retrieved the heavy gray stone mortar and pestle for him and set it on the table beside the lamp. He was adding a mustard-colored powder to the cup. So intent was he on his task that he hadn't removed his cloak, but when he pushed the hood back out of his way, she could finally get a good look at him. His face didn't rivet her the way Wizard Rahl so unexpectedly had. She saw nothing in this man's round eyes, straight brow, or the pleasant enough line of his mouth that looked at all familiar to her. He gestured to a bottle made of wavy green glass. "If you would, could you please grind one of those for me?" While he hurried to the corner to lift a brown crockery pot down from a high shelf, Jennsen unfastened the wire hold-down and removed the glass lid from the jar. She was astonished to see the strangest little things inside. It was the shape that so surprised her. She turned one over with a finger. It was dark, flat, and round. She could see by the light of the lamp that it was something that had been dried. She jiggled the jar. They all looked the same, like a jar full of little graces. Just like the magical symbol, these things had an outer circle, parts that suggested a square inside that, and a smaller circle inside the square. Overlaying it all, tying it together, was another structure, rather like a fat star. While not exactly a grace the way she had always seen it drawn, it bore a remarkable resemblance. "What is this?" she asked. The healer cast off his cloak and pushed up the sleeves of his simple robes. "Part of a flower, the dried base of the filament from a mountain fever rose. Pretty little things they are. I'm sure you must have seen them before. They come in a variety of colors, depending on where they grow, but they're best known for the common blush color. Hasn't your husband ever brought you a nosegay of mountain fever roses?" Jennsen felt her face flush. "He's not. We're just traveling together. We're friends is all." "Oh?" he said, sounding neither surprised nor curious. He pointed. "See there? The petals are attached to it here and here. When the petals and stamen are removed and this selected part of the head is dried, they end up looking like this." Jennsen smiled. "It looks like a little grace." He nodded, returning her smile. "And like the grace, it can be beneficial, but it can also be deadly." "How is it possible to be both beneficial and deadly?" "One of those dried flower heads, ground up and added to this drink, will help the boy sleep deeply so he can fight off the fever, help drive it from him. More than one, though, actually causes fever." "Really?" Looking as if he had anticipated her question, he held up a finger as he leaned closer. "If you were to take 24, 30 for certain, there would be no cure. Such a fever is swiftly fatal. It's not for this effect that the plant is named." He showed her a sly smile. "In many ways an apt name for a flower so associated with love." "I suppose," she said, thinking it over. "But if you ate more than one, but less than a couple dozen, would you still die?" "If you were foolish enough to crush up 10 or 12 and add them to your tea, you would come down with a fever." "And then you would eventually die, just as if you ate more?" He smiled at the earnest concern on her face. "No, if you ate that many, it would cause a mild fever. In a day or two, you would be over it." Jennsen peered carefully in at the whole collection of the deadly little grace-like things, and then set down the jar. "It's not going to harm you to touch one," he said, seeing her reaction to the jarful. "You'd have to eat them to be affected. Even then, as I said, one in conjunction with other things will help the boy's fever." Jennsen smiled her embarrassment and reached in with 2 fingers to retrieve one. She dropped it in the bottom of the mortar, where it looked like nothing so much as a grace. "If it was for an adult who was awake, I'd just crush it between my thumb and finger," the healer said, as he drizzled honey into the cup. "But he's little and asleep besides. I need to get him to drink it down easily, so grind it to a dust." When he was finished, he added the dark dust of the little fever rose flower head Jennsen had crushed for him. Like the grace it resembled, it could be life-saving or lethal. She wondered what Sebastian would think of such a thing. She wondered if Brother Nariv would want such mountain fever roses eradicated because they could potentially be lethal. Jennsen put away the jars for the healer while he took the honeyed drink to the boy. Along with the mother's help, they put the cup to his little lips and gently worked at getting him to drink. Drop by precious drop, they coaxed the sleeping boy to suckle and swallow each little bit they dribbled into his mouth. They weren't able to rouse him, so they had to drip it into his mouth a little at a time, waiting until he swallowed as he slept, then urge him to drink a little more. While they worked, Sebastian returned from the barn. Before he closed the door, she saw stars outside. A wave of cold air rolled past her legs, sending a shiver through her shoulders. When the wind died like this as the sky cleared, it often meant a bone-chilling cold night. Sebastian made for the fire, eager to warm himself. Jennsen put another log on, using the poker to position it askew so it would catch well. The healer, his hand lying gently on the woman's shoulder, nodded his assurance to her as she slowly gave the drink to her sick child. He left her to do the work, and after hanging his cloak on a hook just inside the door closest to the hearth, joined Jennsen and Sebastian at the fire. "Are this woman and child kin?" he said. "No," Jennsen said. With the warmth of the fire, she removed her cloak, too, and laid it over the bench at the table. "We saw her on the road, and she needed help. We just gave her a ride here." "Ah," he said. "She will be welcome to sleep here with her boy. I need to keep my eye on him through the night." She had forgotten about the singular nature of the knife she wore at her belt until he noticed it. "Please," he said, "help yourself to the stew I have cooking. We always have plenty at hand for those who may come here. It's late to be traveling. You both are welcome to use the cabins for the night. They're all empty at present, so you may each have your own for the night." "That would be a kindness," Sebastian said. "Thank you." Jennsen was about to say that they could share one cabin when she realized that he had said that because she had told him that Sebastian wasn't her husband. She realized how it would look if she said anything to change the plan, so she didn't. Besides, the idea of sleeping with Sebastian outdoors was only natural and innocent enough. Together in a cabin seemed somehow different. She recalled that several times on their long journey north to the People's Palace, they had taken shelter at inns. But that was before he had kissed her. Jennsen gestured to include the general area. "Is this the place of the Rog Moss?" He smiled at her question, as if he found it amusing but didn't want to mock her ignorance. "By no means. This is just one of several small outposts we use when we travel. Shelter, and a place where people who need our services can come to us." "The boy is lucky you were here, then," Sebastian said. The Rog Moss studied Sebastian's eyes for a moment. "If he lives, I will be pleased that I was here to help him. We frequently have a brother at this station." "Why is that?" Jennsen asked. "Outposts such as this help provide the Rog Moss with income from serving the needs of people with no other access to healers." "Income?" Jennsen asked. "I thought that the Rog Moss helped people out of charity, not for profit." "The stew, the hearth, the roof we offer, they do not appear magically because there is a need. People who come to us for the knowledge we've spent a lifetime acquiring are expected to contribute something in exchange for that help. After all, if we starve to death, how can we then help anyone else? Charity, if you have the means, is a personal choice, but charity which is expected or compelled is simply a polite word for slavery." The healer hadn't been speaking about her, of course, but Jennsen still felt stung by his words. Had she always expected others to help her, feeling entitled to their help simply because she wanted it? As if her wish for their assistance took precedence over the best interest of their own lives? Sebastian fished around in a pocket, coming up with a silver mark. He held it out to the man. "We would like to share what we have in return for your sharing what you have." After the briefest of glances at Jennsen's knife, he said, "In your case, that isn't necessary." "We insist," Jennsen said, feeling uncomfortable knowing that this money wasn't even really hers, something she had earned in exchange for the food, shelter, and care of their horses, but was taken from dead men. With a bow of his head, he accepted the payment. "There are bowls in the cupboard on the right. Please help yourselves. I must tend to the boy." Jennsen and Sebastian sat on a bench at the trestle table and ate 2 bowls each of the hearty lamb stew from the big kettle. It was the best meal they had had since the meat pies Tom had left for them. "This turned out to our advantage," Sebastian said in a low voice. Jennsen glanced to the side of the room to see the healer and the mother bent over the boy. She leaned closer as he stirred a spoon through his stew. "How so?" His blue eyes turned up to her. "Gives the horses good feed and a good rest. Us too. That gives us an advantage over anyone chasing us." "Do you really think they could have any idea where we are? Or even be close?" Sebastian shrugged as he ate more of his stew. He checked across the room before he spoke. "I can't see how they could, but they've surprised us before, haven't they?" Jennsen admitted the truth of it with a nod and went back to eating her own meal in silence. "Anyway," he said, "this gives us and the horses needed food and rest. It can only help us put more distance on them. I'm glad that you reminded me of how the Creator helps those in need." Jennsen was warmed by his smile. "I hope it helps that poor boy." "Me too," he said. "I'm going to clean up and see if they need any help." He nodded as he scooped up the last piece of lamb into his spoon. You take the next to last cabin. I'll take the one after on the end. I'll go start you a fire first while you finish up here." After he put his spoon in his empty bowl, Jennsen put a hand over his. "Sleep well." She basked in his private smile for her, and then watched as he whispered to the healer. By the man's nod, she guessed that Sebastian had thanked him and wished him a good night. The mother, sitting beside her boy, stroking his brow, also thanked Sebastian for the help and hardly noticed the icy air that rushed in as he went out the door. Jennsen carried a steaming bowl of stew over to the woman. She accepted it politely, but absently, her attention on her small worry asleep at her hip. At Jennsen's urging, the healer sighed in agreement and sat at the table while she served him a bowl of his stew. "Quite good, even if I made it," he said with good humor, as she brought him a mug of water. Jennsen chuckled, assuring him that she shared his conviction. She let him eat, occupying herself with cleaning the dirty bowls in a wooden wash bucket and then adding several logs to the fire. The burning logs shot showers of sparks. Oak made a good fire, but it was messy without a screen. As she arranged the logs, sparks anew swirled up the chimney amid billowing smoke. With a broom from the corner, she swept the dead ashes back into the hearth. When she saw that the healer was nearly finished with his meal, she sat on the bench close to him so that she could speak privately. "We must be leaving early, so in case I miss you in the morning, I wanted to thank you for all your help this evening, not only for the boy, but for us as well." Although he didn't look down, she knew by the expression on his face that he interpreted her need to be away early as having to do with the knife at her belt. She said nothing to dissuade that notion. "We appreciate the generous contribution to our sect. It will help in our efforts to help our people." Jennsen knew he was just marking time until she said what was really on her mind, so she finally did. "I would like to inquire about a man that I've learned is living with the Rog Moss. He may even be a healer, I'm not sure. I'd like to know if you know anything about him." He shrugged. "Ask. I will tell you what I know." "His name is Dreffen." For the first time that night, the man's eyes revealed the fire of emotion. "Dreffen was the evil spawn of Dark and Rahl." Jennsen had to force herself not to show any reaction at the power of his words. She reminded herself that he had seen her knife with the symbol of the House of Rahl, and that might be coloring his words. Still, he sounded emphatic. "I know that much. I still need very much to find him." "You're too late." A satisfied smile ghosted across his face. "Master Rahl protect us," he quoted from the devotion. "I don't understand." "Lord Rahl, the new Lord Rahl, killed him. Spared us all from that bastard son of Dark and Rahl." "Jennsen." Jennsen sat stunned, feeling almost as unseen talons were coming out of a dark sky toward her throat. "You're sure?" was all she could think to say. "I mean, you're sure that Lord Rahl was the one who did it?" "While there were polite words spoken about Dreffen's death, about how he had died in service of the people of Dahara, I believe, as do the rest of the Rog Moss, that Lord Rahl killed Dreffen." "Jennsen." Polite words for murder. Jennsen imagined that one did not just come right out and call it murder to Lord Rahl's face. Ordinary people were murdered. Lord Rahl's victims died in service to the people of Dahara. Jennsen felt her chest tightening at the fright of Lord Rahl being one murder closer to her. Darken Rahl had not found Dreffen. Richard Rahl had. Richard Rahl would find her, too. She gripped her trembling hands together in her lap under the table. She hoped her face didn't show anything. This man was obviously loyal to the Lord Rahl. She dared not reveal her true revulsion, her true terror. "Surrender." Her true anger. "Surrender." That single word echoed around in her head behind the tumbling thoughts, her frustration, her hopeless gloom, her burgeoning anger. Chapter 34. Jennsen sat alone on the floor before the robust fire Sebastian had made for her, staring into the flames, her unblinking gaze absently fixed on the glowing yellow-orange coals that now and again dropped from the checkering logs. She only dimly recalled the farewells to the healer and the boy's mother. She was hardly aware of the slow shuffle through the snow and cold that had gotten her to the empty cabin. She didn't know how long she sat there, staring at nothing, as somber thoughts glided unceasingly through her mind. In his unrelenting effort to get to her, Richard Rahl had taken Jennsen's mother from her, leaving her with no sense of family or home. Jennsen missed her mother to the marrow of her bones, missed her so much that the agony seemed unendurable, yet she had no choice but to endure it. There were no tears left. At times, even the pain of the loss seemed to grow distant. Ever since Althea had told her about Dreffin, Jennsen had thought that if she could find this other child of Darken Rahl, her half-brother, a hole in the world like her, she might find strength through that connection. She thought that they might possibly have a sense of kinship, and, in their common struggle, together come up with a solution to their shared station in life. Whether or not any of that might have come to pass, she would never know now. It had been her hope that it would. That hope was dead. Richard Rahl had killed Dreffin. Richard Rahl would surely kill her when he found her. And he would find her. She knew that now. Really knew it. He would find her. Jennsen! A mad torrent of thoughts cascaded through her mind, everything from hope to despair, terror to rage. Tu warst nicht, tu warst nicht, Grushdeva du kalt nicht. The voice, too, was there, beyond the churning thoughts, beyond the turmoil of emotions, beyond the jumble of disorder, whispering to her in those strangely seductive words. In the end, all other thoughts melted away in the glowing heat of her anger. Jennsen, surrender! She had tried everything else. She had no options left. The Lord Rahl had cut her off from any other hope. She had no choice. She knew what she had to do now. Jennsen rose up, feeling the strange sensation of inner peace at having made the decision. She threw her cloak around her shoulders and marched out into the still, frigid, quiet night. The air was so cold that it hurt to breathe it. The snow crunched as she made her way through the fresh tracks. Shivering with the cold, or maybe the enormity of what she had decided, she knocked gently on the door to the last cabin. Sebastian pulled the door in enough to see it was her, and then quickly opened it to admit her. She hurried in through the opening into the firelight and cocoon of warmth. Delicious heat embraced her. Sebastian was without a shirt. By his clean scent and the towel thrown over his shoulder, she realized that she must have caught him at the wash bowl. He had probably filled a wash bowl in her cabin, too, though she hadn't noticed. Concern creased Sebastian's brow as he stood, posture tense, waiting to see what had brought her there. Jennsen stepped up close to him, so close that she could feel the heat of him. Fists at her sides, she met his eyes boldly. I intend to kill Richard Rahl. He studied her face, accepting her determined words calmly, as if he had known all along that she would someday come to see the inescapable need. He remained silent, waiting to hear the rest of what she had to say. I know now that you were right, she said. I have to eliminate him, or I'll never be safe. I'll never be free to live my own life. I'm the only one to do it, the one who must do it. She didn't tell him why it had to be her. His hand came up to grip her upper arm. His intense gaze never left hers. It will be difficult getting near such a man in order to do as you must. I've told you that we have sorceresses with the Emperor, sorceresses fighting to end the reign of Lord Rahl. Let me take you to them first. Jennsen had been focused on the decision rather than the details of how to go about it. She had given no thought to the approach or dealing with all the layers of people who would be protecting him. She would have to get in close enough for the killing itself. She had only pictured in her mind hitting him with her fist, clutching her knife, yelling at him, screaming how much she hated him, how much she wanted him to suffer for all he had done. She had only fixed on the deed, not on how she would come to be standing that close before him. There were practical matters she needed to take into account if she was to succeed. Do you think these women could help me with what you said? Magic used to end magic? Do you think they might be able to provide me with the means to go after him? Sebastian nodded. I wouldn't suggest it if I didn't. I know the destructive power of the magic on Lord Rahl's side. I've seen it with my own eyes, and I know how our sorceresses have been able to help us fight back. Magic can't do it all, but I think they can provide valuable help. Jennsen held herself erect, her chin up. I would appreciate it. I will gladly accept any assistance they can offer. A small smile curved the line of his mouth. "But know this," she added. "With or without their help, I intend to kill Richard Rahl. If I must go alone and bare-handed, I intend to kill him. I will not rest until I do, because I have no life until I kill him. By his choice, not mine. I'm at the end of running. I will run no more." "I understand. I will take you to our sorceresses, then." "How far do you think it is to the old world? Until we can reach them?" "We won't be going to the old world for now. In the morning, we'll need to start looking for a pass to the west over the mountains. We have to begin looking for a way into the Midlands." Jennsen pulled a ringlet of her hair back off her face when she noticed him looking at it. "But I thought that the Emperor and the Sisters of the Light were in the old world." Sebastian's expression twisted with a sly smile. "No, we cannot allow Lord Rahl to bring war to our people without answering his aggression, without making him pay a price. We intend to fight and win, the same as you have finally decided. Emperor Jagang is with our troops, laying siege to their seat of rule in the Midlands, the city of Adendril. That's where the Confessor's palace is, Lord Rahl's wife's palace. We're cleaving the New World. When spring arrives, we will take Adendril and break the back of the New World." "I had no idea. Have you known all along that Emperor Jagang would try something so bold?" Sebastian half laughed. "I'm his strategist." Jennsen's jaw dropped. You? You thought of it?" He dismissed her wide-eyed astonishment. "Emperor Jagang came to the rule of the old world because he is a genius. He had two alternatives in this, two different recommendations, to attack the Midlands or to attack Dahara first. Brother Nariv advised that right is on our side and that the Creator would grant us victory either way, so he had no preference, no military advice to offer. The Emperor himself already had the goal of Adendril in mind, though he kept silent on it until he heard the recommendations. My recommendation decided it for him. Emperor Jagang does not always use my strategy, but I was pleased that in this he saw what I saw, that taking the city and palace of Lord Rahl's wife would not only be a momentous military victory, but will also strike a great blow at our enemy's very heart." Jennsen was seeing him again as she had at first, in awe at how important he truly was. This was a man who, in part, directed the very course of history. The fate of nations and countless lives hung on Sebastian's word. "You don't think the Emperor may have taken the Confessor's palace by now?" "No," he said with certainty. "We will not waste our brave men trying to take such an important objective until the weather is with us. We will seize Adendril in the spring, when this wretched winter is over. I think we can yet reach them in time to be there for the great event." Jennsen was enthralled by the very idea of seeing such a momentous event, the forces of a free people striking a mighty blow against Lord Rahl. At the same time, she knew it meant the beginning of the end of Dahara, but it really only meant the end of evil rule. In the crackling firelight, it seemed a remarkable night in more ways than one. The world was changing, and she was going to be a part of it. She had changed this night, too. The fire was warm on the side of her face. She realized that she had never seen Sebastian without a shirt. She liked the sight. His other hand came up to gently grasp her other arm. "Emperor Jagang will like to meet you." "Me? But I'm no one important." "Oh, yes, Jennsen. Jagang the Just will be eager to meet you, I can promise you that, to meet the brave woman who wishes to strike such a blow for our courageous people, for the future of a free mankind, and finally bring an end to the scourge of the House of Rahl. For such an historic event as the taking of Adendril and the Confessor's palace, Brother Nariv himself intends to travel up from the old world to witness the great victory on behalf of our people. I'm sure he, too, would be most pleased to meet you." "Brother Nariv?" Jennsen thought about the sweep of events that, until now, she had no idea were taking place. Now, she was a part of those momentous events. She felt a kind of thrill that she would meet Jagang the Just, a real emperor, and maybe even Brother Nariv, who Sebastian said was just about the most important spiritual leader ever to have lived. Without Sebastian, none of it would be possible. He was such a remarkable man, everything from his wonderful blue eyes and his exotic spikes of white hair to his handsome smile and extraordinary intellect. "Since you had a hand in planning the campaign, I'm happy that you'll be there to see your strategy triumph. I admit, too, that I would be honored to be in the presence of such great and noble men." Even though Sebastian seemed as modest as always, she still thought she saw a spark of pride in his eyes, but then he turned serious. "When we meet with the Emperor, you mustn't be alarmed by what you see." "What do you mean?" "Emperor Jagang has been marked by the Creator with eyes that see more than ordinary men can see. Foolish people are frightened by his looks. I wanted to forewarn you. You mustn't be frightened of such a great man simply because he looks different." "I won't be." "It's settled then." Jennsen grinned. "I agree to your new strategy. We can leave for the Midlands, the Emperor, and the Sisters of the Light in the morning." It seemed he hardly heard her. His gaze wandered her face, her hair, returning at last to her eyes. "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever met." Jennsen felt his fingers tighten on her arms, pulling her closer. "You favor me with such words," she heard herself say. He was a trusted advisor to an emperor. She was just a girl who grew up in the woods. He influenced history. She simply ran from it, until now. And yet he was just Sebastian, a man she talked with, traveled with, ate with. She had seen him yawn from exhaustion and fall asleep countless times. He was a fascinating mix of nobility and commoner. He seemed to chafe at being held in awe, yet by his manner he seemed to court it, if not demand it. "I'm sorry at how inadequate those words sound," he whispered, looking very humble. "I mean so much more than that you're merely beautiful." "You do?" Her words were more than a question. They were expectant wonder. Sebastian's mouth met hers in a rush. His arms surrounded her. She held her arms out to the side, afraid to hug him because if she did, she would have to touch his naked flesh. She stood in his arms, her own arms held out stiffly, her spine arched back under the press of him. His mouth felt luscious against hers. His arms did more than encircle her. They sheltered her. Her eyes closed as she sagged into his kiss. His whole body felt so hard against hers. His fist seized her hair at the nape of her neck, holding her as he moaned against her lips as his warm tongue unexpectedly filled her mouth. Jennsen's head was spinning with the delicious sensations. The world seemed to be tipping, and she felt as if she were hanging in his arms. She felt the sudden press of the bedding against her. The shock of being on her back with him atop her had her suddenly confused and not knowing what to do or how to react. She wanted to stop him before he went any further. At the same time, she feared to do anything that would cause him to stop, to believe she was spurning him. It occurred to her how very alone they were. Such isolation worried her. Yet it excited her, too. With the two of them so completely alone, only she could stop him. The choices that she made not only decided her own path, but also held sway over Sebastian's heart. It gave her a comforting sense of power. But it was just a kiss. More of a kiss than in the palace, but still just a kiss. A head-spinning, heart-pounding kiss. She surrendered herself into his embrace, daring to use her tongue as he did his, and was exhilarated by his ardent response. She felt like a woman, a desirable woman. Her hands ran up the smooth skin of his back, feeling the landscape of his bone and muscle, unhindered by a veil of cloth, feeling him flex as he pressed against her. She could hardly get her breath with the wonder of such feelings. "Jen," he whispered breathlessly into her ear, "I love you." Jennsen was stunned, speechless. It didn't seem real. It felt like she had to be dreaming it or living in someone else's body. She knew she'd heard him say it, but it just didn't seem real to her. Her heart was racing so fast that she feared it might burst. Sebastian's breath, too, came in desperate pulls, as if his lust for her were driving him mad. She clung to him, eager to feel the warm breath of his words in her ear again. She feared to believe him, though, to allow herself to believe him, to know if it was real, if this was really happening to her, or if she was only imagining it. "But you can't mean it." Her words were a wall to protect her. "I do," he panted. "I do. I can't help myself. I love you, Jennsen." His warm breath tickled her in a way that ran a scrumptious shiver up through the core of her. For some reason, the memory of Tom came into her mind. She saw him in her mind's eye, smiling at her in that way of his. This would not be Tom's manner. She didn't know how she knew that, but she did. Tom would not approach the subject of love in this fashion. For some reason, she felt a stab of ache for Tom. "Sebastian, tomorrow we leave to carry out our destiny." Jennsen nodded against his shoulder, marveling at how those words sounded somehow passionate. Their destiny. She held on tight, feeling the slick warmth of his back, feeling him push himself against her leg, feeling his arm lying across her belly as his hand caressed her hip. in a way hoping he would say something to thrill her, to frighten her, at the same time praying he wouldn't. But this night is ours, Jen, if you will only seize it. Jennsen! Sebastian, I love you, Jennsen. I love you. Jennsen! She wished the image of Tom would leave her mind. Sebastian, I don't know what... I never wanted to. It wasn't my intention to allow myself to feel this way, but I do. I love you, Jen. I didn't expect it. Dear Creator, I can't help myself. I love you. Her eyes closed as he kissed her neck. It felt so good feeling his intimate whispers in her ear, a whisper that in a way sounded close to a painful confession, laced with regret, anger, yet thick with desperate hope. I love you, he whispered again. Jennsen! Jennsen shuddered with the pleasure of the sensation, with the pleasure of feeling like a woman, of knowing that her mere existence thrilled a man. She had never felt particularly attractive before. Right then she felt more than beautiful. She felt seductively beautiful. Surrender! She kissed his neck as he shifted his weight. She kissed his ear and ran her tongue along it as he had done to her. His whole body felt afire. She froze when his hand slid up under her dress. His fingers glided over her bare knee, over her bare thigh. It was her choice to make, she told herself. It was. She gasped, eyes wide, staring up at the dark rafters. His mouth covered hers before she could say the word wanting to come out. Her fist pounded his shoulder once in frustration at not being able to say that one short, important word. She gripped his face to push him away, to allow her to say it. But this was the man who had saved her life. If not for him, she would have been killed along with her mother that rainy night. She owed him her very life. Letting him touch her in such a way was nothing in exchange for that. What harm was it? It was a small thing compared to the way he had opened his heart to her. Besides, she cared for him. He was a man any woman would desire. He was handsome, smart, and important. Moreover, she was excited that he cared so for her. She was. What more could she want? She forcefully banished the unwanted image of Tom from her mind by focusing all her attention on Sebastian and what he was doing to her. His touch weakened her in a way that made her ache. His fingers felt so good that tears ran down her cheeks. She forgot the word, wondering why she would ever have wanted to say it. Her fingers clutched the back of his head, holding on for dear life. Her other fist pressed against the sides of his ribs as she cried out at what he was doing to her. All she could do was pant as she squirmed, helpless at the indecent delight of it. Sebastian, she gasped. Oh, Sebastian. I love you so much, Jen. He forced her knees farther apart. He pushed himself between her trembling legs. I need you, Jennsen. I need you so. I can't live without you. I swear I can't. It was supposed to be her choice. She told herself that it was. Sebastian. Surrender. Yes, she breathed. Dear spirits, forgive me, yes. Chapter 35. Oba leaned a shoulder against the red-painted side of a wagon set back out of the way. Hands in his pockets, he casually surveyed the busy marketplace. People crowding among the open-air stands seemed in a festive mood, possibly because at long last spring was nearly at hand. Even if winter was not yet ready to relinquish its harsh grip, despite the biting chill, people chatted and chuckled, bargained and bickered, purchased and perused. Little did the shuffling crowds braving the cold wind know that someone important was among them. Oba grinned. A Rahl was among them, a member of the ruling family. Since he had decided to become invincible, and over the course of his long journey north, Oba had become a new man, a man of the world. At first, after the death of the troublesome sorceress and his lunatic mother, he was a swirl in newfound liberty, and hadn't given any thought to coming to the people's palace. But the more he considered the pivotal events that had taken place and all the new things he had learned, the more he had come to realize that the journey was vital. There were still bits missing, bits that could lead to trouble. That Jennsen woman had said that quads hunted her. Quads only hunted important people. Oba was concerned that they might turn to hunting him, too, since he was important. Like Jennsen, he was also one of those holes in the world. Lethea hadn't explained to him what that meant, but it made Oba and Jennsen both special in some way. It somehow linked them. It was possible that Lord Rahl had learned about Oba, maybe from the treacherous Lethea, and he feared having a rightful rival who could challenge him. Oba was, after all, also a son of Darken Rahl, an equal in many ways. Lord Rahl had magic, but Oba was invincible. With all the potential trouble brewing, Oba thought it best to look after his own interests by traveling to his ancestral home to learn what he could. Even before he had decided to travel north, Oba had had his concerns. Still, he enjoyed his visits to new places and had learned many new things. He kept lists of them in his head. Places, sights, people. Everything meant something. In quiet moments, he would go over those mental lists, seeing what things fit together, what revelations he could divine. It was important to keep the mind active, he always said. He was a man on his own now, making his own decisions, choosing his own road, doing as he pleased, but he still had to learn and grow. But no more did Oba have to feed the animals, tend the garden, mend fences and barns and houses. No longer did he have to haul and fetch and obey every foolish whim of his lunatic mother. No more did he have to endure the troublesome sorceress's loathsome cures, her furtive glances. No more did he have to listen to his mother's tirades, her taunts, or be subjected to her venomous humiliation. To think, she had once had the gall to order him to pick away at a frozen mound of muck. Him, the son of Darken Rahl himself. How Oba put up with it, he didn't know. He supposed that he was a man of remarkable patience, one of his many stellar traits. Since his maniacal mother had always been so harshly adamant that he never spend money on women, Oba had celebrated his freedom from her tyranny, once he reached a good-sized city, by visiting the most expensive whore he could find. He understood then why his mother had always been so dead set against him being with women. It was enjoyable. He had found, though, that those women, too, could be cruel to a man of his sensitivity. They, too, would sometimes try to make him feel small and unimportant. They, too, would fix him with that calculating, callous, condescending gaze he so hated. Oba suspected that it was his mother's fault. He suspected that even from the world of the dead, she might still manage to reach into this world, through a whore's cold heart, to vex him in his most triumphant moments. He suspected that her dead voice whispered vicious things in the women's ears. It would be just like her to do that, even in her eternal rest. She would not be content to let him have any peace or satisfaction. Oba wasn't a spendthrift, not by any means. But the money that had so rightly been his did bring him some well-deserved pleasures, like clean beds, good food and drink, and the company of attractive women. He tended his money carefully, though, lest he end up without it. People, he knew, were only too covetous of his wealth. He had learned that just having money, though, brought him favors, especially from women. If he bought them drinks or small gifts, a pretty piece of cloth for a scarf, a trinket for their wrist, a shiny pin for their hair, they were more likely to cozy up to him. They often took him somewhere quiet, where they could be alone with him. Sometimes it was an alley, sometimes it was a deserted wood, sometimes it was a room. He suspected that some of them just wanted to get at his money. Still, it never failed to amaze him what entertainment and satisfaction he could derive from a woman, frequently with the aid of a sharp knife. Being a man of the world, Oba knew about women now. He had been with many. Now he knew how to talk to women, how to treat women, how to satisfy women. There were a number of women still waiting, hoping, praying he would one day return to them. Several had even deserted their husbands, expecting they might win his heart. Women couldn't resist him. They fawned over him, delighted over his looks, marveled at his strength, moaned at the way he pleasured them. They especially enjoyed it when he hurt them. Anyone less sensitive than he would fail to recognize their tears of joy for what they really were. While Oba enjoyed the company of women, he knew he could always have another, so he didn't become entangled in long love affairs. Most were brief, some very brief. For now, he had more important matters on his mind than women. Later, he would have all the women he could ever want, just like his father had. Now, at last, he could look upon the soaring stone splendor of his true home, the People's Palace. Some day it would be his. The voice had told him so. A hawker pushed in close beside him, disturbing Oba's pleasant thoughts, his imagining of what lay ahead for him. "Charms for you, sir. Magic charms. Good luck for sure." Oba frowned down at the hunched hawker. "What?" "Special charms with magic. Can't go wrong for a silver penny." "What do they do?" "Well, sir, the charms are magic sure. Wouldn't you like a bit of magic to ease the terrible struggles of life? Make things go your way for a change? Only a silver penny. Things did go his way, now that his lunatic mother wasn't around to pester him and keep him down. Still, Oba did like to learn new things. What will this magic do? What kinds of things? Great things, sir. Great things. Give you strength at will, strength and wisdom. Strength and wisdom beyond any normal mortal man. Oba grinned. I already have that. The man was at a loss for words for only a moment. He looked over each shoulder, making sure no one was close before he leaned in closer, pushing against Oba's side in order to speak confidentially. He winked up at Oba. These magic charms will help win the girls for you, sir. Women already can't get enough of me. Oba was losing interest. This magic promised only what he already had. The man might as well say that the charms would give Oba 2 arms and 2 legs. The filthy little man cleared his throat, thick with phlegm, as he leaned close again. Well, sir, no man can have enough wealth, or the most beautiful... I'll give you a copper penny if you can tell me where I can find the sorceress Althea. The man's breath stank. Oba pushed him back. The hawker lifted a crooked finger. His wiry eyebrows rose as well. You, sir, are a wise man, just as you said. I knew I saw something keen about you. You, sir, have ferreted out the one man in this market who can tell you what you need. He thumped his chest. Me. I can tell you all you need to know on the subject, but as a man of your wisdom will no doubt realize, such obscure and privileged information will of necessity cost you a great deal more than a copper penny. Yes, sir, a great deal more, and worth it. Oba frowned. How much more? A silver mark. Oba grunted a laugh and started walking away. He had the money, but he didn't appreciate being played for a fool. I'll ask around. Decent people can offer such simple help as directions to the sorceress, and they will expect nothing more than a tip of my cap. The hawker scurried along at Oba's side, eager to renegotiate, speaking hurriedly as he struggled to keep up. Loose ends of his ragged outfit flapped like flags in the breeze as he dodged people dodging Oba. Yes, I can see you're a wise man indeed. I'm afraid I'm no match for you, sir. You've bested me, that's the simple truth of it. But there are more knotty matters you don't know about, matters a man of your rare sensitivity should know. Things which could very well mean your safety in such a dangerous venture as I think you may be about to undertake. Things which not many folks can tell you true. Oba was sensitive. That much was true. He gazed down at the man shuffling along sideways like a dog begging for a scrap. A silver penny, then. That's all I'm offering. A silver penny, then, he conceded with a sigh. For the valuable information you need, sir, which I warrant you will hear nowhere else. Oba halted, satisfied that the man had caved in to the superior intellect. Hands on his hips, he stared down at the hopeful fellow, licking his cracked lips. It was against Oba's nature to part with money so easily, but he had plenty, and something about this intrigued him. He fished around in his pocket, slipping 2 fingers into the leather purse he kept there, and drew out a silver penny. He flipped it to the scruffy fellow. All right, then. As the man caught the coin, Oba caught the hawker's bony wrist. I will give you the price you ask. But if I don't think you're telling it true, or if I suspect that you're holding back on me, I'll take back the coin, and I'll have to wipe your blood off it before I return it to my pocket. The man swallowed at the dangerous look on Oba's face. Sir, I'd not cheat you, especially not once my word is given. You'd best not. So where is she? How can I find Althea? In a swamp she lives, but I can tell you how to get into her for only... Do you think I'm a stupid oaf? Oba twisted the wrist. I have already heard that people go to see the sorceress, that she receives visitors in her swamp, so something more than the way into her place had better be included in the fair price I've given you. Yes, the hawker gulped in pain. Of course it is. Oba eased up. Still wincing, the man was quick to go on. I was going to say that I will tell you the secret way to get to her through a swamp for the generous price you've already paid. Not just the regular way in, which folks know, but the secret way in as well. Few, if any, know of it, all included in the price. I'd not hold anything back from a fair man like you, sir. Oba glared. Secret way in? If there is a regular way, a way people use to see Althea, why would I care about this other way? People go in to see the sorceress Althea for a telling. She's a powerful one, this sorceress. He leaned closer. But you must be invited before you can go see her for a telling. None dare to go without being invited. People all go in the same way, so as she can see them coming, after she's invited them in and withdrawn her bloodthirsty beasts that guard the path. A sly smile spread on the man's twisty face. It seems to me that if you were invited in, you wouldn't need to ask people how to get there. Have you been invited, sir? Oba gently pushed the reeking hawker back. So there is another way in? There is, a back way in. A way to sneak up on her, if you're of a mind, while her beasts guard the front door, as it were. A smart man might not choose to approach a powerful sorceress on her terms. Oba glanced to the sides, checking that people weren't listening. I don't need to go in a secret back way. I'm not afraid of the sorceress. But as long as I've already paid for it all, I'll hear it all told, both ways in, and everything else about her, too. The man shrugged. If you're of a mind, you can simply ride due west, as the folks who was invited to Althea's place do. You travel west across the plains until you come to the largest snow-capped mountain. Beyond the mountain, you turn north and follow along the base of the cliffs. The land goes lower until it finally enters the swamp. Just follow the well-kept path on in through the swamp. Stay on that path. Don't wander off. It leads to the home of the sorceress Althea. But the swamp would be frozen this time of year. No, sir. This is the wicked place of a sorceress and her menacing magic. Althea's swamp does not bow to winter. Oba twisted the man's wrist until he cried out. Do you think me a fool? No place is a swamp in winter. Ask anyone, the man squealed. He swept his other arm around. Ask anyone, and they'll tell you Althea's place doesn't bow to the Creator's winter, but is hot and boggy all year round. Oba let up on the man's wrist. You said there was a back way in. Where is it? For the first time, the man hesitated. He licked his weather-cracked lips. It's difficult to find. There are few landmarks, and they're hard to spot. I could tell you how to find the place, but you might miss it, and then you'll think I lied to you, when it's only that it's tricky to find by directions alone, if you're not familiar with the land in these parts. I'm already thinking about having my coin back. I'm only looking to your safety, sir. He flashed a quick apologetic smile. I don't like giving a man like you only part of what he needs, for fear I might live to regret it. I believe in giving the full measure of my word. Go on. The hawker cleared his wet throat, and then spat to the side. He wiped his mouth with the back of his filthy sleeve. Well, sir, the best way to find it is if I take you there. Oba checked an older couple passing nearby, then pulled the man by his wrist. Fine, let's go. The hawker dug in his heels. Now hold on there, I agreed to tell you, and I can do that. Like I said, though, it's hard to find. But I can't be expected to give up my business to go off as a guide. It's a number of days I'd be away from an income. Scowling, Oba leaned down. And how much is it you want to guide me there? The man took a heavy breath as he considered, muttering to himself as if toiling at tallying up numbers in his head. Well, sir, he said at last, lifting a finger on his free hand that stuck up through a short stub of a knit glove. I guess I could be gone for a few days if I were to be paid a gold mark. Oba laughed. I'm not giving you a mark, gold nor even silver, for the work of guiding me for a few days. I'd be willing to pay you another silver penny, but that's all. Take it, or give me back my first silver penny and be gone. The hawker shook his head as he mumbled to himself. Finally, he squinted up at Oba with a look of resignation. My charms aren't selling well of late. To tell the truth, I could use the money. You have the best of me again, sir. I'll guide you then, for a silver penny. Oba released the man's wrist. Let's go. It's across the Azrith Plains. We'll need horses. Now you want me to buy you a horse? Are you out of your mind? Well, walking is no good. But I know folks here who will give you a good deal on a couple of horses. If we treat the animals right, I'm sure they'd agree to buy them back once we return, less a small fee for their use. Oba thought it over. He wanted to go up into the palace to have a look around, but he thought it best if he visited Lethea's sister first. There were things to learn. That sounds fair. Oba gave the hunched hawker a nod. Let's go get some horses and be off then. They moved out of the quieter side route into a main road thick with milling throngs. There were a number of attractive women about. Some of them looked Oba's way, the invitation and longing clear in their eyes. They met his gaze, hungry for him. Oba gave them smiles, a token suggesting the possibility of more later. He could see that even that much thrilled them.
It occurred to him, though, that these women roaming the market were probably lowly peasants. Up in the palace were likely to be the kind of women Oba wanted to meet, women of station. He deserved no less. After all, he was a Rahl, practically a prince, or something comparable, maybe even something more than that.
What's your name, anyway? Oba asked, seeing as we'll be traveling together.
Clovis. Oba didn't offer his name. He liked being called Sir. It was, after all, only fitting.
With all the people, Oba said as his gaze swept the crowds, how is it that your charms aren't selling? Why is it that you're having hard times?
The man sighed in apparent misery. It's a sad tale, but it's not your burden, sir.
Simple enough question, I think.
I suppose it is. He shielded his eyes from the sunlight with a hand, partly covered in a knitted fingerless glove as he peered up at Oba. Well, sir, a time ago back in the thick of winter, I met a beautiful young woman. Oba looked over at the hunched, wrinkled, disheveled man shuffling along beside him.
Met her?
Well, sir, truth be told, I was offering her a charm. Clovis's brow twisted curiously, as if he'd suddenly come across something quite unexpected. It was her eyes that seized you, big blue eyes, blue like you rarely see. Clovis ogled up at Oba. The thing is, sir, her eyes look very much like yours. It was Oba's turn to frown.
Like mine?
Clovis nodded earnestly. They did, sir. She had eyes like yours, imagine that. Something about her, about you as well, that looks somehow familiar. Can't say as I know what it is, though.
What does this have to do with your hard times? Did you give her all your money and fail to get between her legs?
Clovis seemed shocked by the very notion. No, sir, nothing like that. I tried to sell her a charm, so she would have good fortune. Instead, she stole all my money. Oba grunted skeptically.
I'd bet she was batting her eyelashes and smiling at you while she had her arm in your pocket to her elbow, and you were too eager to suspect what she was really doing.
Nothing like that, sir, nothing like that at all. His voice turned bitter. She set a man upon me, and he took it all for her. He did it, but it was at her word, I'm sure of it. The two of them stole all my money, robbed me of everything I had earned all year. Something tickled Oba's memory. He scanned his mental lists of odd and unrelated things. Some of those things began to come together.
What did this woman with the blue eyes look like?
Oh, she was beautiful, sir, with thick ringlets of red hair. Even if this woman had robbed the man of his savings, the distant look in his eye told Oba that he was still clearly taken by her. Her face was like a vision of a good spirit, it was, and her figure was enough to take your breath away. But I should have known by that bewitchingly evil red hair that there was something more devious to her than her beauty. Oba halted and seized the man by the arm.
Was her name Jennsen?
Clovis offered only a regretful shrug. Sorry, sir, she never gave me her name. But I don't imagine there are many women that look like her, not with those blue eyes, her exquisite looks, and those ringlets of red hair. Oba didn't think so either. The description fit Jennsen perfectly. Well, wasn't that just something? Clovis pointed. There, sir. Down there is the man who can sell us horses. Chapter 36. Oba squinted into the gloom under the thick vegetation. It was hard to believe how dark it was in under the towering trees, down at the bottom of the crooked spine of rock, when it had been such a bright, sunny morning up in the meadow above. It looked wet ahead, too. He turned from the way leading in under the vines and hanging trailers of moss to look back up the steep, rocky incline toward where he had left Clovis by a warm fire, watching their horses and gear. Oba was glad to finally be free of the jumpy little man. He was wearing, like a pesky fly, buzzing around all the time. All the way across the Azrith plains, the man jabbered on and on at length about everything and nothing. Oba would have rather been rid of the hawker and gone alone, but the man had been right about how difficult it would have been to have found this place down into the back of Althea's swamp. At least the man had no intention of going into the swamp with Oba. Clovis had seemed nervous and edgy about making sure that his customer went in, though. He was probably worried that Oba wouldn't believe him and was eager to prove himself. He waited at the top, watching, shooing, with hands covered in tattered, fingerless gloves, impatient for Oba to go in and see that he was being given his money's worth. Oba sighed and started out again, slogging ahead through the underbrush, stooping beneath low branches. He tiptoed across roots where he could, and waded through standing water where he had to.
The air was still and as stagnant as the water. It felt wet, too, besides smelling foul. Strange birds called from far off through the trees, back in the shadows where light probably never reached, back beyond vines, thick clumps of leaves, and rotting trunks leaning drunkenly against stalwart companions. Creatures moved through the water, too. What they could be, fish or reptile or conjured beast, there was no telling. Oba didn't like the place, not one bit. He reminded himself that there would be a myriad of new things to learn once he got to Althea's place. Not even that cheered him. He thought about the strange bugs and weasels and salamanders he'd seen so far, and the ones he was likely yet to see. That, too, failed to cheer him. He still didn't like the place. Ducking under branches, he swept spiderwebs aside. The fattest spider he'd ever encountered fell to the ground and darted for a hiding place. Oba, quicker yet, squashed it good. Hairy legs clawed the air in death before going still. Oba grinned as he moved on. He was beginning to like the place better. His nose wrinkled. The farther in he went, the worse it smelled, reeking with a strange, pungent, dank rot. He saw steam rising off through the trees and began to detect an odor something like rotten eggs, but more acidic. Oba was beginning not to like the place again. He plowed onward, unsure if it had been a good idea to go to see Althea, especially by the route suggested by the hand-wringing hawker. Oba sighed as he slogged through thick brush. The sooner he got in and had a chat with Althea, the sooner he could be out of the disgusting place. Besides, the voice had stirred, restless that he continue. The sooner he was finished with Althea's sister, the sooner he could visit his ancestral home, the People's Palace. It would be wise to learn what he could first, so that he might know what to anticipate from his half-brother. Oba wondered if Jennsen had been to see Althea yet, and, if she had, what she had found out. Oba was more and more convinced that his fate was somehow linked to the Jennsen woman. Too many things kept leading back to her for it to be a meaningless connection. Oba was very careful about how things on the lists he kept connected. Other people weren't so observant, but they didn't have to be. They weren't important. Both he and Jennsen were a hole in the world. Possibly even more interesting, they both had something in their eyes that Clovis had noticed. What it was exactly, the man wasn't sure. Oba had pressed him, but he couldn't say. As the morning wore on, Oba made the best time he could along the twisted tangle of roots that passed for a path until it sank lower ahead of him into an expanse of still, dark water. Oba paused, panting, sweat streaming down his face, checking to the sides, searching for another way across to where the ground looked to rise up again. It appeared that the way ahead tunneled on through the thick, steamy growth. But first, he had to get across the water. Hot as he was, that didn't sound half bad. He saw no vines hanging down that might steady him, so he quickly cut a stout limb and stripped it of branches to make himself a staff to help him balance as he crossed the low place. Staff in hand, Oba waded out into a stretch of water. It wasn't as much of a cooling relief as he had hoped. It smelled awful and was full of brown leeches. As he moved through the water, trailing a wake that dislodged debris from the banks, he had to keep brushing the clouds of biting bugs from his face. He kept checking, but unless he backtracked to look for another way, he saw that it was the only way to dry land beyond. That thought alone convinced him to keep going. There were roots enough under the surface for footing, but Oba soon found himself in up to his chest, and he wasn't yet to the middle. As deep as it was, the water made him buoyant, which meant his footing wasn't as good. The roots at the bottom were slippery, and poor support for the staff, but it at least helped him keep his balance. He was a good swimmer, but didn't like the thought of what else might be swimming with him, and preferred to keep on his feet. Almost to the far bank, Oba was just about to discard the staff and swim the rest of the way to wash the sweat off when something heavy brushed against his leg. Before he could think what to do about it, the thing bumped him hard enough to push him from his feet, dumping him into the water. As soon as he plunged into the deeper water, the thing enveloped his legs. He instantly thought of the monsters that were said to dwell in the swamp. Throughout their long ride, Clovis had regaled him with stories of the beasts, warning him to be careful, but Oba had scoffed, confident in his own strength. Now, Oba cried out in fright of the monster that had him. He struggled frantically, in gasping panic, trying to shake his legs free, but the fire-breathing beast had him fast and wouldn't let go. It reminded him of being locked in the pen when he was little, trapped and helpless. Oba's cry echoed out across the frothing water, returning threefold from the darkness beyond. The only clear thought that came to him was that he was too young to die, especially in so awful a fashion. He had so much ahead of him to live for. It wasn't fair that this should happen to him. He cried out again as he splashed and fought to escape. He wanted away, just as he had wanted out of the terrible trapped feeling of being locked in the pen. His screams never helped then, and they didn't help now. Their echo was empty companionship. The thing suddenly and forcefully twisted him around, spinning him, and dragged him under. Oba gasped a breath just in time. As he went under, eyes wide in fright, he saw for the first time the scales of his captor. It was the biggest snake he had ever seen, but he was also struck with relief, because it was still a snake. It might be big, but it was just an animal, not a fire-breathing monster. Before his arm could be pinned, Oba snatched the knife in a sheath at his belt and yanked it free. He knew that in water it would be difficult to use the same force as on dry land. Still, stabbing the thing would be his only chance, and he had to do it before he drowned. With his neck stretching for air, but the life-giving surface getting farther and farther away as the weight around him continued to drag him deeper, his feet unexpectedly found something solid. Rather than continue to fight to reach the surface for air, he let his legs bend as he sank. When his legs were folded like a bullfrog ready to spring, he tensed his powerful leg muscles and pushed with a mighty shove off the bottom. Oba exploded from the water, coils of snake wrapped around him. He landed on his side, halfway out of the water, up on twisted roots. The snake, its body cushioning Oba's weight when they crashed to the ground, clearly didn't appreciate it. Iridescent green scales shimmered in the weak light as the reeking water sluiced from both combatants. The snake's head rose over Oba's shoulder. Yellow eyes peered at him through a dark mask. A red tongue flicked out, feeling along its troublesome prey. Oba grinned. "Come closer, my pretty friend." The snake undulated along his body as the eyes fixed him with a menacing stare. If a snake could get angry, this one was. Lightning quick, Oba snatched the thing behind the dark green head, gripping it in his brawny fist. It reminded him of the wrestling he had done before on rare occasions. He liked wrestling. Oba never lost at wrestling. The snake paused to hiss. With powerful muscles, each held back the other. The snake tried to enfold Oba in yet more coils and gain the advantage by constricting. It was a mighty struggle of strength as each tried to wrestle the other into submission. Oba recalled that ever since he had listened to the voice, he had been invincible. He remembered how his life used to be ruled by fear, fear of his mother, fear of the powerful sorceress. Most everyone feared the sorceress, just as most everyone feared snakes. Except Oba had stood up to her dangerous magic. She had sent fire and lightning at him, magic able to blast its way through walls and vanquish any opposition, yet he had been invincible. What was a lowly snake in the face of that kind of opponent? He felt a bit chagrined that he had cried out in fright. What had he, House of Rahl, to fear, least of all from a mere snake? Oba rolled farther up onto solid ground, taking the snake with him. He grinned as he brought the knife up under the scaled jaw. The huge animal went still.